Chapter 316. Su Ming's expression remained the same. He only frowned for a brief moment before his brows relaxed. If it was anyone else bidding, Su Ming might have chosen a bid because he was interested in the crane. However, since it was Tian Lan Meng who offered 500,000 stone coins in one go, Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence and decided not to bid. However, even if he did not bid, it did not mean that the other people in the room would not bid. Zishan noticed Su Ming's frown relaxing, and a barely noticeable glint appeared in her eyes. As she smiled, she spoke softly. 700,000. The auction hall that should have been Tian Lan Meng's bid fell into a moment of silence. Tian Lan Meng's status made many people wary, and they even had thoughts of not competing with her. After all, this item did not seem to be of much use. That was why Zishan's voice echoed in the silence and immediately caught the attention of the people in the auction hall. Their gazes instantly gathered on the balcony of the ninth room. Su Ming stood there, and Zishan, who was by his side, was looking at him with a smile. Based on her expression, it was as if she would only obey Su Ming's orders. When most of the people saw the scene on the balcony of the ninth room, the first thought that popped up in their heads was that Su Ming had ordered the woman to place such a bid. Tian Lan Meng also lifted her head. Once she cast a glance at Su Ming standing on the balcony, her expression remained the same, and her gaze fell on Zishan. 1 million. Tian Lan Meng spoke softly. Brother Su, do you still want this item? Zishan covered her mouth and smiled as she looked at Su Ming from the ninth room. A cold glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes as he looked at the woman. Her actions were sinister. She used the fact that Zishan was standing by his side to incite hostility between Su Ming and Tian Lan Meng. She casually placed a bid of 700,000 stone coins, causing Tian Lan Meng to pay double the price. I don't want it. Su Ming averted his gaze and said calmly. Zishan's pupils shrank. She originally thought that Su Ming would definitely fly into a rage. Even if he would not vent his anger, he would still show some of it. If that was the case, she would be able to achieve what she wanted. In fact, she had already made preparations to reply to Su Ming. She did not think that Su Ming would not be able to see through her petty actions, but she was certain that Su Ming would not be able to grasp this. After all, everything she did seemed to be for Su Ming. Yet now, Su Ming's gaze had only turned slightly colder. There was no other change in him. This made Zishan feel that the person before her was unfathomable and unfathomable. In the end, Tian Lan Meng bought the crane made of straw. Even if she had to pay double the price, she did not mind it. What she cared about was that the crane came from another domain. What she cared about was whether or not it would help her in comprehending the Tao. The auction continued with the blue-haired old man's voice. As more and more items were taken out, and as the mermaid and the sea dragon swam around, the crowd gradually began to discuss among themselves. It was difficult for them to calm down, and a strong desire to compete for the top slowly filled the auction house. Zishan gradually found it harder and harder to see through Su Ming. This man who stood not too far away from her did not place a bid for any of the items. He only stood there and watched quietly as the items were sold off one by one. Several hours later, the intense bidding in the auction house stirred up buzzing sounds in the air. It was as if there was an invisible force surrounding the place that could stir up the people's emotions and make all of them descend into madness. Yet Su Ming remained as calm as still water. He simply stood there and watched unmoved. This person might seem level-headed, but in truth, he's still very immature. If he placed a bid with this sort of pretense of being a profound person in the auction house, then he would definitely attract attention. It'll be difficult for him to easily get what he wants without people fighting for it. It'll be easier for him to get what he wants from those who place a few bids for each item. Zishan cast a glance at Su Ming before averting her gaze. The blue-haired old man on the stone pillar at the center of the auction house let out a few coughs at that moment. And once the intense atmosphere in the area eased up a little, once the place became slightly quiet, his voice traveled in all directions. Thank you for your kindness, my fellow tribe members from Freezing Sky. All the precious treasures have been bought. and I believe that the next item I'll bring out will be the same. But I must remind all of you that this item will stir up intense competition. Please be prepared. Once the blue-haired old man finished speaking, he lifted his right hand. Bring it up. Once he spoke, a distorted ripple that was several hundreds of feet wide appeared behind him. Booming sounds came from within the ripple, and soon after, 9 people walked out slowly. These 9 people were all strong men, and a gigantic long spear was slung over their shoulders. The instant these people walked out of the distorted ripple, a gigantic black long spear that was 100 feet long appeared before the people's eyes. The moment the spear appeared, a shocking murderous aura instantly spread out with a howl and enveloped the entire area, causing all the people in the area to hear shrill cries of pain at that instant. In fact, some of the more powerful berserkers could even vaguely see that there were tens of thousands of vengeful souls gathered on the long spear. They surrounded the spear and screamed in pain. Sky Shaman Spear. I've seen this item in some ancient scrolls before. That's right, this is it. This is the Sky Shaman Spear. 1,000 years ago, when the shamans invaded Sky Mist Barrier en masse, they used a unique method to create 9 Sky Shaman Spears. It's said that each Sky Shaman Spear contains a power that can shake the sky and earth, and it can kill a powerful berserker in the Berserker Soul Realm. An uproar rose swiftly, stirring up waves of sound that surged into the sky within the entire auction house. There were even some people who instinctively stood up with expressions of disbelief on their faces. A hint of smugness appeared on the blue-haired old man's face. When they were deciding whether they should bring this item out for auction, different discussions had stirred up in Western Sea Clan, but in the end, they still chose to send it to the land of freezing sky. This item is the Sky Shaman Spear, and it has been verified by Western Sea Clan. There is no doubt about it. If you want to use it, you will need to make a sacrifice. Once it attacks, it can destroy a powerful berserker in the Berserker Soul Realm. However, due to the passage of time and the fact that the shamans have lost the method to create this spear, it can only be used once. Once it is used, it will turn into ashes and disappear into the wind. But even if you can only use it once, with this item, you'll have the power to make those in the Berserker Soul Realm wary. With this item, perhaps you will have a chance at survival during Sky Mist Shaman Hunt. The starting bid for this item is 1 million stone coins. Let the bidding begin. The old man waved his arm, and the moment his voice fell, the sounds of people placing their bids immediately rose and fell. 1,500,000, 2 million, 2,300,000, 2,700,000, 3,500,000. The intense voices continued rising in the auction house. Zishan hesitated for a moment in the 9th room before she looked toward Su Ming. However, in her eyes, Su Ming still looked the same. Not a single bit of change could be detected from him. Brother Su, if you like this item, I can buy it for you. Did you give me another chance to buy it for you? Su Ming turned his head around and cast Zishan a glance. Only once. Zishan nodded. Any item? Su Ming smiled faintly. Anything you like. Zishan lifted her chin. Her voice was very pleasant to the ears. But I don't trust you. I'll need proof to do this. As Su Ming spoke, he lifted his right hand and brought out a blank beast skin from his bosom. He placed it on the table and looked at Zishan. Zishan hesitated for a moment, but when she remembered her master's orders, she did not think too much about it. She moved forward and drew a few strokes with her right index finger. Delicate words appeared on the beast's skin. Once she wrote down the words, she pressed her palm on the beast's skin and left behind her palm print. I wonder if I can buy you, Zishan? Su Ming's smile remained on his face. He put away the beast skin and looked at Zishan. His words stunned Zishan, and a dark look appeared on her face. Brother Su, please don't joke around. I'm talking about the item I'm auctioning. Besides, if you want to buy me, you might not be able to afford it. Zishan was displeased, and her expression turned cold. Name your price. Su Ming did not mind the coldness in Zishan's words and spoke languidly. You. Zishan glared at Su Ming. She had never encountered such a thing before and did not know how to speak. The sounds of people bidding for the item became louder. The appearance of the spear had shocked many people, causing them to place their bids. 8,600,000, 9,400,000, 10 million. The person who placed the bid for 10 million came from the same room as Su Ming's. It was the third room, and it was a gentle voice. However, even though that voice was gentle, there was a tone that allowed no room for argument. Perhaps it was because of that voice, but the auction hall fell into a momentary silence. Once Zishan heard it, she stared at Su Ming and laughed coldly. Even if it's 10 million, you can't buy me. Su Ming, I respect you as a guest, but don't be too presumptuous. Your words are the same as insulting me. Zishan's voice became colder. Insulting you. Miss Zishan, I'll be taking this item. Please pay for me. Su Ming smiled. Once he finished speaking, he turned his head around and looked at the auction hall outside the balcony. 100 million. Su Ming spoke languidly, but his voice traveled forth like thunder, causing the entire auction hall to fall into absolute silence. Countless gazes instantly gathered on the balcony of the ninth room and on Su Ming. Even the old auctioneer was stunned and looked towards Su Ming. Zishan was momentarily stunned, and her expression changed drastically. At that moment, she was not the only one whose expression changed. There was also an old man in the eighth room whose body was as withered as a skeleton. That old man was holding a wine cup, and with a loud crack, the wine cup shattered. His face was twisted and his breathing quickened, but he seemed to have remembered something and forced himself to suppress his emotions. 100 million. He's Su Ming, and his bidding price is 100 million. Does he have that many stone coins? 100 million stone coins? That's impossible. It's rare to see such a price appear in auctions. Even if the Sky Shaman Spear has shocking power, it can only be used once. It's not worth this price. Sir, do you know that if you make a false bid and cannot bring out so many stone coins, then it will be seen as a provocation to Western Sea Clan? Even if you're a disciple of Freezing Sky Clan, you will still have to pay the price. The blue-haired old man said hoarsely as he stared at Su Ming. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 3:17. Su Ming stood on the balcony, and when he heard the words, a smile appeared on his face. He brought out the beast skin and threw it towards the old man. Once he caught it, he opened it and looked at it, and a strange expression immediately appeared on his face. Zishan's eyes were filled with anger as she stood beside Su Ming. She did not expect Su Ming to be so shameless. They had originally agreed to buy an item for her, but she did not expect that he would use this sort of method. She had not thought this through thoroughly, but she did not expect that this sort of change would occur. Su Ming ignored Zishan's gaze and instead looked at the blue-haired old man as he spoke languidly. This beast's skin is incredibly fragile. You should be careful when you look at it. If it's destroyed, it'll be bad. The blue-haired old man fell silent. He lifted his gaze from the beast's skin and hesitation appeared on his face. The change in his expression, Su Ming's words, and the sky-high price of 100 million immediately attracted the attention and curiosity of all the people around them. Sounds of discussions rose all around, and gradually, the place became buzzing. Give it to him. I'll explain this to the clan. As the buzz of discussions grew stronger and seemed to have surpassed the amount of attention paid to the auction, a hoarse and dark voice suddenly came from the eighth room. A glint appeared in the blue-haired old man's eyes, and the beast skin in his hand immediately turned into ashes. At the same time, his words echoed in the area. This item belongs to you. Next, we'll be auctioning off the next item. Before he could finish speaking, Su Ming suddenly spoke, and his voice traveled through the auction hall almost at the same time as the old man's voice. Wait a moment. Since this item belongs to me, then I'll hand it over to you. Take care of it for me and auction it off. The old man lifted his head once again and glared at Su Ming with hostility in his eyes. That's against the rules. No way. I'll use this place to auction this item. The highest bidder will get it. The starting price is 5 million. I'll take whatever I can earn. My fellow clan members, please place your bids. The moment the old man spoke, his voice traveled into the auction hall at the same time as Su Ming's voice. Roars of laughter immediately echoed in the auction hall. Those who could come to this place were all famous people in the land of Freezing Sky. If they were not disciples of Freezing Sky clan, then they were powerful berserkers from the tribes nearby. It was easy for them to decide between Western Sea clan and Su Ming. It was especially so for the Sky Shaman Spear. It was incredibly attractive to many people. The people who had placed their bids previously had originally thought that they had no hope of getting it and were sighing in pity, but when they heard Su Ming's words, they were immediately tempted. 6 million, 7 million, 8 million, 10 million. It was the same price again. However, the person who bid this time was not the third room. Instead, it was the 8th room with the skeleton-like old man. A smile appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips, and he looked at Zishan, who was staring at him coldly with anger on her face. Su Ming had tolerated the woman's multiple provocations. She had humiliated Ziche and tried to stir up conflict between him and Tian Lanmeng. In fact, Su Ming could already imagine that something like this might happen again in the future. You're despicable. Zishan's chest heaved. She was so angry that she looked as if she wanted to tear Su Ming apart. At this moment, in the third room that had called out the price of 10 million, was the young man with a black dragon embroidered on his clothes. He sat there with a smile on his face. This Su Ming is very interesting. Beside the young man was the old man from the Heaven Gate. The old man smiled bitterly and shook his head. He didn't say anything. 20 million. The young man picked up his wine cup and took a sip before he spoke. His voice traveled out of the room and echoed in the auction hall, stirring up another wave of commotion. Even though not many treasures had been brought out in the auction up to this point, the price had already reached its peak. 21 million. After a short period of silence, a voice came from the 8th room once again. 30 million. The young man spoke languidly from the 3rd room, and an interested look appeared on his face. He suddenly felt that he was beginning to admire that person called Su Ming. 30 million. 1 million. After a long while, the hoarse voice from the 8th room spoke once again. 39 million. This time, the person who placed the bid was not the young man from the 3rd room, but Tian Lanmeng, who was sitting in the empty corner of the auction hall. Tian Lanmeng's expression was as calm as ever. She tucked a lock of hair behind her ear and spoke softly. The blue-haired old man sitting on the stone platform at the center of the auction hall had an incredibly dark expression on his face. He originally wanted to stop this, but since Sect Elder High from the 8th room had also joined the bidding, then this unreasonable matter became reasonable. He also understood that Sect Elder High had to place a bid. In fact, he was also eager for Su Ming to participate in the auction. If he did not do so, then he would not be able to explain himself when he returned to the sect. Unless he could really bring out 100 million and hand it over to the sect, then with the interference of his enemies, this matter would continue to escalate. 40 million. The voice from the 8th room was filled with anger, and it echoed in the air. Tian Lanmeng smiled faintly and did not place another bid. As for the young man from the 3rd room, he put down his wine cup. After a moment of thought, he smiled and shook his head, no longer placing another bid. Since you've placed such a bid, then you must immediately return the item to its original owner. If you place a false bid, then you will also be punished. The young man might not have placed another bid, but he did not mind using those words to befriend Su Ming. Besides, he did not care about this sect elder from Western Sea Clan. Su Ming cast a glance at the 3rd room and memorized the voice. Before long, someone knocked on the door. Ziche opened the door and brought back a storage bag, then handed it to Su Ming calmly. Su Ming took it and scanned it with his divine sense before putting it away. As if he was sighing with emotion, he spoke slowly, as if he was talking to himself, but also as if he was talking to Zishan, who was standing by his side. With this money, I can bid for any item. I won't have to be like I was before, not daring to place a bid because I have too much money. I've never seen someone as shameless as you. Su Ming, you're shameless. Despicable. Zishan was so angry that her face turned stark white. She glared at Su Ming, then turned around and stormed out of the room. There was a different air to her lithe body at that moment. Ziche cast a glance at Zishan, leaving through the corner of his eyes, then shook his head and averted his gaze. He sighed in his heart. Thank goodness, Su Ming's second senior brother did not come. If he did, then Zishan would have seen what it meant by there would always be someone stronger than her. In fact, if Uzi had come, then Zishan would have gone mad and wondered just what she would have to face in the land of freezing sky during this period of time. She could only say that she was very lucky to have met Su Ming. The storm in the auction died down once the price reached 40 million. The blue-haired old man's face was dark, but he had no choice but to continue hosting the auction. He brought out some of the remaining items in an attempt to gather the people's attention on him and get the auction back on track. When the sky gradually turned dark and the first day of the auction was about to end, the atmosphere in the auction hall gradually rose once again when the last item was brought out. The Great Yu dynasty is the Berserker tribe's holy land, and the Great Baron Cauldron is the dynasty's sacred vessel. In fact, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it is the Berserker tribe's sacred vessel. During that era, during the most glorious period of the Berserker tribe, cauldrons were supreme treasures. Treasures that were made in the shape of cauldrons were even rarer, because each of them contained shocking power. Even now, we don't know whether the Great Yu dynasty still exists. We don't know where the Great Baron Cauldron, the vessel of our race, is located. In fact, even if our descendants tried to imitate other items in the shape of cauldrons, it would still be difficult for them to avoid the destruction of their cauldrons. We all know that once a cauldron is created, the moment its form appears, even powerful berserkers in the Berserker Soul realm will not be able to withstand the destructive power, cauldrons. All treasures in the shape of cauldrons only existed during the ancient era. Now, what I'm going to bring out is one of them. This is a treasure in the shape of a cauldron. In fact, the seal on it still exists. Over the years, it has been buried in a corner, and many years ago, the bishop of Western Sea Clan discovered it. There should be some items sealed within the cauldron, but we can't open it. Western Sea Clan has studied it for a long time, but we can't open it. Now, we're bringing it to the great tribe of Freezing Sky to be auctioned. Only the fated can obtain this item, and only the fated can open it. This item is a treasure of the Berserker tribe, and it does not belong to any tribe or clan. I hope that one of us in the land of Freezing Sky can obtain this item. The old man's voice grew louder, and eventually, as booming sounds reverberated in the air, the 9 sea dragons swam about behind him and disappeared into the air. Soon, when they reappeared, they were holding up a gigantic cauldron that was about 1,000 feet in size, and they slowly walked out of the distorted ripples. The cauldron was so big that the instant it appeared, it formed a powerful, oppressive presence. The people might not be like ants before it, but they were not eye-catching either. The 9 mermaids surrounded the cauldron, and their chants echoed in the air, causing the oppressive presence to come from the cauldron. At the same time, it also gave the crowd a solemn air, because the song the 9 mermaids were singing was the god of Berserkers' song created by the first god of Berserkers. The land where I was born did not do anything. After I was born, the Berserkers prospered. If the heavens have eyes and want to see the Berserkers become wild, if the gods have spirits, then from now on, I will be the king of the Berserkers above the gods. If the heavens do not dare open their eyes, then I will use the world to seal the heavens once more. If the gods do not obey me, then I will use the cauldron to destroy the gods and rebuild the land of the Berserkers. The mermaids' voices echoed in the air, causing the auction hall to be immersed in a solemn atmosphere. Su Ming stood there with the god of Berserkers' song echoing in his ears. He could feel the madness of the god of Berserkers within the song, and he could hear the respect contained within the lyrics. He could also hear the ostentatious and heroic spirit of sealing the world once more and establishing the Berserker blood once more. That was the Berserker tribe at its peak. Countless Berserkers followed their king, their god of Berserkers, and fought against the heavens. Su Ming mumbled, and a fascinated look appeared in his eyes. The starting bid for this cauldron is 10 million. The bidding begins now. The moment the mermaid's song echoed in the air, the blue-haired old man's voice rose abruptly. He wrote very diligently. Each chapter took about 2.5 hours to write, and he never dared to slack off. He kept working diligently. He longed for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Truly, he longed for it very much. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 3:18. Normally, one would ask for recommendation votes at midnight. That would be considered a good time. If it was a few minutes earlier, one would be considered an early bird. Root woke up late. It was almost midnight. When he wrote this, he recalled the time when he was still a reader. At that time, he was also very happy, playing games with a cigarette in his mouth, chatting on QQ, and casting recommendation votes for a few authors in the middle of the night. Now that he thought about how his identity had changed and how he had actually become an author one day, he felt a little emotional. This was something he hadn't expected at the time. Perhaps some of you will feel the same way one day. I hope that when that time comes, you will remember that you voted for Root. You voted for the devil on Monday. Thank you. I need recommendation votes. I really need it. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to cast recommendation votes or monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 3:19. 11 million, 13 million, 15 million. Due to the cauldron's low price being too high, there were not many people who had the ability to buy it in the auction hall. There were only 3 people who placed bids, and one of them was the second young master from the third room. The other person was the elegant Tian Lanming. It was as if the 10 million stone coins were just a number to her. As for the last bidder, it was an old man wearing a conical bamboo hat. Only his white hair could be seen, and his appearance could not be seen clearly. His voice was hoarse, and he was inconspicuous as he sat in the crowd. Even from the beginning until the end, he had rarely bid. At this moment, when he suddenly shouted out a high price of 15 million, it immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding people. Su Ming frowned. He was deeply moved by the fact that the people who came to the auction hall from the land of freezing sky had so many stone coins. Compared to these people, Su Ming shook his head. If he did not count the money he had just obtained from the auction hall, then he simply did not have the strength to compete with these people. 500 golden stone coins. It's more than the white stone coins, which are numbered in the hundreds, and it's more than the purple stone coins, which are numbered in the thousands. By the looks of it, these 5 million stone coins aren't even enough for the low price. Su Ming knew that he had miscalculated. In truth, right from the start of the auction, he had already realized that 5 million stone coins was a huge sum of money. But in this auction hall, it was nothing. That was why he managed to obtain 40 million stone coins. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He stared at the 1,000 feet cauldron floating in midair above the auction hall, and a zealous look appeared in his eyes. No matter how he looked at it, this was the barren cauldron used to create medicinal pills. It was especially so for Su Ming. He could feel a wave of heat around the cauldron that did not fuse with the illusionary ocean. It was clear that it had been enveloped in heat for a long period of time, and it fulfilled the requirements to create medicinal pills. 17 million, Tian Lanming said softly. Tian Lanming spoke softly. Her voice was gentle and pleasant to the ears, and the unique temperament she exuded caused all those who looked at her to be unable to help themselves but have their hearts beat faster. This was a woman who did not seem to belong to this world. She was elegant, indifferent, and her breath smelled like orchids. She sat there, and she could make the area around her quiet. It was as if wherever she was, no matter which area it belonged to, it would naturally become her world. Others could only look at her from afar and could not get close to her. It was not that she was aloof, but that there was a barrier between the two worlds. 20 million. Second young master's voice came from the third room. There was a nonchalant tone to his voice, and compared to Tian Lanming's gentle voice, it sounded different, but there was a similar feeling in the hearts of those who heard it. It was as if the two bidders were from the same world. The old man with the bamboo hat fell silent, as if he was hesitating as to whether he should continue bidding. In the midst of his silence, Su Ming lifted his head swiftly. He had to get his hands on the barren cauldron. He had come to this auction precisely for it. 23 million. Su Ming stood on the balcony and spoke languidly. As his voice traveled outwards, due to the incredible presence he had created previously, he instantly attracted a lot of people's gazes. Tian Lanmeng lifted her head and looked at Su Ming calmly on the balcony of the ninth room. After a moment of pensive silence, she no longer placed any bids. A glint appeared in second young master's eyes in the third room. He looked at the cauldron floating in midair in the auction hall, then at Su Ming in the ninth room, and a smile suddenly appeared on his lips. He has his eyes on this item. Second young master, treasures in the shape of a cauldron rarely appear in the world. If you can get your hands on it and offer it to the elder, he might have some other use for it, the old man named Chun from Heaven Gate said in a low voice. Offer it to the elder? A contemplative look appeared in second young master's eyes. At that moment, due to Tian Lanmeng's silence and second young master's contemplation, the auction hall fell into a state of silence once Su Ming placed his bid. Su Ming's heart pounded against his chest. He still could not remain indifferent and not be bothered by it. He became nervous instead. 30 million. A hoarse voice spoke abruptly, and as it did, the atmosphere in the auction hall instantly became so intense that it was suffocating. Su Ming swept his gaze over and saw the person who placed the bid. That person was the old man with the bamboo hat. 40 million. Su Ming gritted his teeth, and without much hesitation, he placed his bid. The moment he placed the bid of 40 million, the auction hall burst into an uproar. 40 million was definitely not a small sum. It was not as if it had never appeared before, but in truth, it did not matter whether it was 100 million or the person from Western Sea Clan who spent several tens of millions to buy the cauldron. In many people's eyes, it was just a show. It was different now. This was a real auction, and in this sort of environment, a bid of 40 million was enough to make countless people's breathing quicken. The old man with the bamboo hat did not lift his head. Once Su Ming placed his bid, he opened his mouth and said, 41 million. 45 million? Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he placed his bid once again. This was all the stone coins he had, and it was his limit. If the old man continued bidding, then Su Ming would have to use another method. The old man with the bamboo hat fell into a moment of thought before he spoke once again. 50 million. Su Ming closed his eyes, and when he opened them once again, there was calmness in his eyes. He did not look at the old man with the bamboo hat, but at the floating barren cauldron. The cauldron was shining with the light of time, as if it was bearing the weight of the ages of time. Once the old man with the bamboo hat placed his bid of 50 million, besides the sounds of heavy breathing, no other sound could be heard in the auction hall. This price was definitely not something an ordinary person could possess. Even the clan elder from Western Sea Clan in the 8th room had to spend countless years to accumulate wealth that was slightly more than this price with his level of cultivation and status. As Su Ming remained silent, and the people in the auction hall were waiting for him to perhaps place another bid, someone knocked on the door to the 9th room where Su Ming was. Su Ming did not turn his head back. Ziche walked over calmly. A man in black robes stood outside the door. That man had a white mask on his face. He wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming, who was in the room, then placed a white storage bag on the table before he turned around and left. Right up till the end, that person did not say a single word. Ziche frowned. Once he picked up the storage bag, he returned to Su Ming's side. However, when he saw the word dream sewn on the storage bag, he seemed to have understood something and handed the item to Su Ming. Once Su Ming took it, he looked at the word dream sewn on the storage bag. After a moment of silence, he scanned the bag with his divine sense. 60 million. The moment Su Ming retrieved his divine sense, he placed his bid in the auction hall. The moment he placed his bid, it immediately stirred up an uproar. A price of 60 million was something many people would never be able to obtain in their entire lives. The old man with the bamboo hat shuddered and lifted his head slowly. He cast a glance at Su Ming on the balcony of the 9th room. then lowered his head and no longer placed another bid. After waiting for some time, the blue-haired old man's voice echoed in the auction hall. This cauldron will be sold to the person in the 9th room for 60 million. Today's auction will end here. The auction will continue tomorrow morning. I can tell you beforehand that there will be even rarer treasures appearing in tomorrow's auction. As the blue-haired old man spoke, he lifted his right hand and swung his arm. Immediately, the sea dragon beside him roared and ripples spread outwards. Wherever the ripples went, the illusory deep sea gradually disappeared, revealing the dark night and the moon in the sky, along with the snowflakes falling from the sky. As the illusory deep sea disappeared from the auction hall, a fresh wave of cold air blew into the air. The people gradually got up and left, returning to their lodgings to wait for daylight. Su Ming also left. Ziche followed behind him. The two of them walked out of the 9th room and returned to their lodgings at the edge of the tribe. Not long after they returned, a Western Sea Clan disciple came to deliver the gigantic barren cauldron to Su Ming and also took away enough stone coins. The cauldron was 1,000 feet big and was placed outside Su Ming's tent. Su Ming stood beside the cauldron while Ziche stood guard in the distance. However, there were still quite a number of people watching from outside their tents, and some of their gazes were filled with hostility. The cauldron was too big. Su Ming tried to put it away into his storage bag, but he could not do so. Western Sea Clan would naturally not care about how Su Ming took the cauldron away. In fact, the dozen-something people who brought the cauldron over were also watching from a distance. If Su Ming could not take the cauldron away and allowed it to be left outside for a night, then this matter would turn into a huge joke. Su Ming stood beside the gigantic cauldron. At such a close distance, he could even feel the thick, ancient air coming from the cauldron. This item was like an old man who had gone through the changes of time, or perhaps it had gone through many owners. Su Ming lifted his hand and pressed it against the gigantic cauldron. He closed his eyes, and his divine sense spread out through his hand and fused into the cauldron. The moment his divine sense entered the cauldron, Su Ming's body shuddered. A great force bounced back from the cauldron and charged towards Su Ming's divine sense. It was as if it wanted to destroy his divine sense, and like a raging wave, it wanted to drown Su Ming's divine sense. All of this happened too quickly. The bouncing force arrived in an instant, but the moment it touched Su Ming's invisible divine sense, hum, Su Ming uttered a few words that were difficult to pronounce softly. No one could hear those words. Su Ming only opened his lips slightly. This was the method to control the barren cauldron that he had obtained when he first stepped into the strange dimension where he obtained the method to create medicinal pills and saw the picture of the cauldron. Ever since he obtained it, this was the first time he used it. It was just 3 simple syllables, but the power contained within them was something Su Ming could not understand. The moment he uttered the first syllable, he could clearly feel his flesh and blood trembling, as if the power contained within those syllables was sucked out and surging into the gigantic cauldron through his right hand. When he uttered the second syllable, the bones in Su Ming's body seemed to have started rubbing against each other. Perhaps more accurately speaking, it was not rubbing against each other. It was as if all the bones in his body were trembling against each other. As they trembled, a faint sound traveled out of his body, and that was the sound of hum. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 320. His voice traveled into the gigantic cauldron, and at the same time, Su Ming's third syllable traveled out, causing a bang to ring in his head. It was as if his soul had left his body and was surrounding the cauldron with the power of the syllable. The power that bounced back abruptly froze once Su Ming said those 3 syllables. At the same time, the pendant Su Ming had obtained from Dark Mountain on his chest abruptly shone with a dark light. With a flash of that dark light, it enveloped the gigantic cauldron in the blink of an eye. The cauldron shuddered within that dark light and slowly shrank until it was the size of a palm. It floated up and landed on Su Ming's palm. That strange sight immediately made all the onlookers widen their eyes in disbelief. The people from Western Sea clan who had brought the cauldron oversucked in a sharp breath, and shock appeared on their faces. The people who were also observing Su Ming's actions previously with his second young master, the old men from Western Sea clan who came with the auction, and even the auctioneer named Feng and Zishan. All of them were observing, wanting to see how Su Ming would take the cauldron away. After all, the cauldron had been in Western Sea clan for many years, and it had never shrunk. Even when it was brought to the land of freezing sky, it was only because Western Sea clan had a storage item that could hold a mountain. Yet right before their eyes, Su Ming had only pressed his hand on the cauldron, and the cauldron was immediately enveloped by a dark light before it shrank in an unbelievable manner. All those who saw this scene would think of the words the blue-haired old man had said during the auction. Only those who are fated can obtain this item, and only those who are fated can open it. Zishan instinctively opened her mouth in the crowd. She knew about the cauldron, and she also knew that it had never changed over the years it had been in Western Sea clan. It was like an inanimate object, and countless people from Western Sea clan had researched it in an attempt to make it their own. They had tried everything they could, but to no avail. Even the clan master of Western Sea clan had to give up in the end. Only when the progenitor of Western Sea clan, Guru Lilong, said one sentence did the research on the cauldron come to an end. That was what the blue-haired old man said at the auction. In fact, the cauldron had been sent to the great land of freezing sky because of Guru Lilong's will. He felt that since no one in Western Sea clan was fated to have this cauldron, then they should not forcefully keep it, or else a great disaster would befall them. That was why he had sent it to the great land of freezing sky to see whether there was anyone who was fated to have this cauldron. At that moment, the breathing of the Western Sea clan elders who came with the auction quickened. They stared at the small cauldron shining with a dark light on Su Ming's palm with a dumbfounded expression. At the same time they were shocked. All of them remembered Su Ming's face. A strange light appeared in second young master's eyes. He looked at Su Ming standing in the distance, and a smile appeared on his lips. Very good. I didn't change my mind in vain and not buy this item to give to the elder. A grave look appeared in the eyes of Old Shun from Heaven Gate. He looked at Su Ming standing in the distance, and for the first time in his life, he did not regard him highly because of his master. He remembered this young man called Su Ming. Tian Lan Meng was also looking at Su Ming, and an elegant smile appeared on her face. A dazed look appeared on Su Ming's face as he was the center of everyone's attention. He only recovered after a long while. He looked at the small cauldron in his hand, then turned around in silence and walked back to his tent. Ziche followed him and sat down cross-legged outside his tent, looking at the people's gazes gathered on him coldly. After a long while, the owners of those gazes gradually averted their gazes and returned to their own tents with complicated, jealous, sentimental expressions on their faces. The sky was already dark. The moon shone brightly in the sky, but snow continued falling, causing the ground to be covered in layers of silver. The entire tribe fell silent. Only the lights that were covered by the snow let out crackling sounds in the cold wind. Su Ming sat down cross-legged in his tent and looked at the cauldron in his hand. Excitement appeared in his eyes. He lifted his left hand and stroked the cauldron. A feeling as if his flesh and blood were connected rose within him the moment he touched the cauldron. This is indeed the barren cauldron used to create medicinal pills, and the blue-haired old man from Western Sea clan was right. This cauldron hasn't been opened for a long time. There's a medicinal pill inside. Su Ming mumbled, and the light in his eyes grew brighter. His heart raced against his chest. He originally did not believe in those words, but when he used the method he used to control the barren cauldron to make the cauldron smaller, he could vaguely feel a strange life force within. That life force did not seem to belong to a living being, but to the medicinal pill itself. This cauldron has existed for a long time. If no one has opened it for 1,000 years, then the medicinal pill inside is something from 1,000 years ago. If no one has been able to open it for 10,000 years. Su Ming's heart pounded even more furiously. He stared at the cauldron in his hands, and uncertainty gradually appeared in his eyes. Once he observed the cauldron carefully, the uncertainty in his eyes was replaced by shock. A serious look appeared on Su Ming's face. He brought the cauldron before him and sniffed it carefully. The shock on his face grew stronger, and there was even a hint of disbelief in his eyes. The medicinal fragrance isn't strong. There are two possibilities for this. Either the medicinal pill in the cauldron has been abandoned, or the medicinal pill hasn't been completely created. But if this unknown medicinal pill has been abandoned, then even though the medicinal fragrance would naturally not be strong, but after so many years, it wouldn't be a problem of the fragrance not being strong anymore. It would have completely disappeared, unless no one has opened it for more than 1,000 years, or else the medicinal pill hasn't been completely created. Su Ming's eyes sparkled as he stared at the cauldron. After a long while, he lifted his left hand and made a strange gesture. This was the hand seal he used to control the opening of the barren cauldron when he was creating medicinal pills based on his memories. If he chanted some strange syllables, he could open the barren cauldron and end the creation of the medicinal pill. Su Ming knew that as long as he chanted the syllables that matched the hand seal, he would immediately open the cauldron. However, as he looked at the cauldron, uncertainty appeared in his heart. If the medicinal pill in the cauldron isn't abandoned, but is in an incomplete state, then if I open it now, then it will truly be abandoned. After a moment of silence, Su Ming put away the hand seal and put the cauldron away into his storage bag. This isn't the place for me to study it. I'll think about it when I return to the 9th summit. Su Ming did not act rashly. Once he put away the small cauldron, he closed his eyes and began exercising his breathing. The night passed by quickly. When the next morning arrived, Su Ming walked out of his tent and went to the auction hall with Ziche. Su Ming did not participate in the bidding on this day. He only had one goal in mind at that moment, the small black humanoid sealed within the stone. That item did not appear on the second day of the auction. When the last day of the auction arrived, the atmosphere in the auction hall had weakened to a certain extent after most of the auction had been going on for the past few days. Then the blue-haired old auctioneer finally brought out the item Su Ming had been waiting for. It was a mountain rock that was about the height of a person. It was completely transparent, and there was a small black humanoid sitting cross-legged within it. It looked as if it was alive. I don't know what this item is. I've asked a lot of people before, but most of them don't know anything about this item. This item wasn't brought by Western Sea Clan. A few days ago, an esteemed guest brought it here to auction on our behalf. That esteemed guest called this item the soul in the stone. He once said that he originally had 3 of these stones, but once he opened the other 2, one of the small black humanoid inside died and turned into a black crystal, and the other one turned into a gust of black wind and escaped. Its whereabouts are still unknown. This item is the last one. He doesn't want to test it anymore and wants to auction it off. His asking price is not high, but he has a request. The person who buys it must tell him the name of this item and prove that what he said is true. If he is satisfied, he will pay for the item and give it to the person for free. He will also give the other black crystal that turned into after he opened it to the person. The person will talk to you alone, so you don't have to worry about others knowing about this. The starting bid for this item is 100,000. The blue-haired old man spoke slowly. Due to the strangeness of this item, it attracted quite a number of people's attention. However, most of them were unfamiliar with this item and had never seen it before. They could not tell where it came from and what it could be used for, which was why it was not convenient for them to place a bid. 150,000. The voice that placed a bid came from the crowd. It came from a thin, middle-aged man. He did not hide his face, but simply sat there with an aloof expression. His clothes were very unique. They were made up of black and white. This sort of attire was unique to a tribe called Enlightenment Gathering Tribe in the land of freezing sky. This tribe was skilled in creating ice sculptures, and they would use a unique method to give life to the ice sculptures so that they could turn them into an enchanted vessel. The process of creating these ice sculptures was very secretive. Besides the great tribe of freezing sky keeping a sealed record of it, it was difficult for others to know about it. A price of 150,000 was practically nothing to the people who could join the auction. However, there are too few people who knew about the origins and uses of this item, which was why the bidding for it was limited. 200,000. Su Ming stood on the balcony and looked at the small black humanoid in the transparent mountain rock. He could clearly see that the small humanoid only had 3 fingers on each of its hands. Once he was certain that the small humanoid was the item he needed to create the welcoming of deities, Su Ming placed a bid. 300,000. The tribe member from Enlightenment Gathering Tribe frowned. 500,000. 700,000. 1 million. Su Ming said slowly, his gaze fixed on the transparent mountain rock. Sir, please don't force yourself to name a price. You don't even know what this item is, and you're just trying to name a price. If you can't even tell us where it came from and what it can be used for, then how are you going to deal with this? The thin, middle-aged man from Enlightenment Gathering Tribe lifted his head and looked at Su Ming. I don't know who put this item up for auction, but I'm sure you're here. I can tell you that only I know what this item is. No one else knows what it is, let alone how to use it. The Enlightenment Gathering Tribe member stood up and spoke to the crowd. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 321. If I didn't know, I wouldn't have placed a bid. Su Ming's gaze moved away from the transparent mountain rock and fell on the Enlightenment Gathering Tribe member dressed in a long black and white robe. The thin man from Enlightenment Gathering Tribe stared at Su Ming with a dark look on his face. He did not have a lot of stone coins on him, and he did not have any specific item he wanted when he came here. He did not expect to run into this mountain rock here. The moment he saw the item, the excitement in his heart surpassed that of the countless people in the auction hall. What made him even more ecstatic was that this item was incredibly rare. It was impossible for anyone else to know of its origins. Only he knew of its use. He had originally thought that it would be easy for him to obtain this item, and the mountain rock starting price was not high either. This made him excited, and at the same time, he could not suppress his anticipation and desire. Yet, halfway through his journey, Su Ming appeared out of nowhere. 1 million was his limit. He did not have any more stone coins to buy this item. Even if his desire for this item had reached an indescribable level, the shyness in his pockets caused his eyes to gradually turn bloodshot. He's lying. Sir, I'm the only one who knows what this item is. No one else besides me knows. The Enlightenment Gathering Tribe member shouted towards the people around him. Yet most of the people around him ignored him. Even those who looked towards him would have their eyes sparkling, and no one could tell what they were thinking. Auctioneer from the 9th room, since there's someone who doubts that you don't know what this item is, then I will give you a chance. Tell me what this item is. A calm voice traveled forth. The person who spoke was not the mysterious owner of the mountain rock, but the blue-haired old man who hosted the auction. A glint appeared in the blue-haired old man's eyes as he spoke languidly. If you can't answer, then you will have to give up on the chance to place a bid to show fairness. Oh. Could it be that all those who want to buy this item have to say what it is in front of everyone in the auction hall? Su Ming cast a glance at the blue-haired old man with a ghost of a smile on his face. That's right, this is the rule. The blue-haired old man swept his gaze past Su Ming and nodded. The breathing of the tribesman from Di Luo tribe quickened at that moment. For this mountain rock, he had already offended Su Ming. In his mind, if he immediately left once he obtained this item, then he might be able to rush back to the tribe before anyone found him. This rule is a little unfair. If I say it and someone else offers a price, won't they be able to copy my words and identify the item? If it's possible, it's only fair for Western Sea Clan to bid against him and me, unless there's no one else who can make a bid. I'll also tell you where this item came from. If you manage to buy it in the end, you don't need to send it to me after the auction ends. I want to take it away on the spot, Su Ming said unhurriedly. The blue-haired old man sneered inwardly. Fine, he said in a low voice. No one bid for this item before. Since that's the case, I won't accept bids from others. Right now, only the 2 of you can obtain this item. If you can obtain it, you can take it away. This is indeed a soul in the stone, But the most important thing is not the small black person inside, but the mountain itself. By using a special method, it can make one's chi and blood stronger and nourish the mind, making it easier to meditate during cultivation. As for the small black humanoid inside, it was formed after the mountain rock absorbed the filthy aura from the world. This thing is poisonous, but it won't be fatal, but it will affect the growth of a person's level of cultivation. You will need to use a unique method to bring it out. If you bring it out recklessly, it will only bring you more harm than good. Su Ming stated flatly, and his voice traveled through the entire auction hall. You're lying. You're wrong. The member of Enlightenment Gathering Tribe immediately roared loudly and glared at Su Ming. Hatred appeared in his eyes, but that hatred came out of nowhere. He had a feeling that Su Ming was doing this on purpose to prevent him from obtaining the item. A smile appeared on Su Ming's face. He did not care about people who could not hide their emotions. He only cared about those who did not show their emotions on their faces and could not tell what they were thinking. Su Ming looked at the member of Enlightenment Gathering Tribe and asked, I'm done. Now it's your turn. What is this item? The blue-haired old man's face was dark, but he could not blame Su Ming. After all, he did not know what this item was either. Since you're certain that the person in the 9th room is lying, then you can tell me what this item is right here. I can tell you that the person who brought this item to be auctioned is right here. If you're satisfied with what you say, then perhaps that person will change his mind. The blue-haired old man looked at the thin member of Enlightenment Gathering Tribe. This item, the member of Enlightenment Gathering Tribe, was speechless for a long time. He did not know what to say. If he told the truth, then forget about whether he would be able to obtain this item. Just the dangers he would face on his way would be enough to kill him. In fact, there was even a high possibility that he would bring disaster to the tribe once he returned. Yet if he did not say anything and watched as the item was bought by Su Ming, he would not be able to accept it. As he stared at Su Ming, a sinister smile suddenly appeared on the corners of the member of Enlightenment Gathering Tribe's lips. This item is called the Magnetic Abyss Stone. It's the exact opposite of what you said. The key to this item is not the mountain rock on the outside, but the small black humanoid inside. This small humanoid is called a stone phantom. It was formed naturally by absorbing the aura from the earth. Its greatest use is to store it within the body. Once you refine it, you can increase your power slightly, but its greatest use is to use the methods of Enlightenment Gathering Tribe to carve it into a treasure to protect yourself. This treasure will be refined along with your life, and you can die in my place once. As his words were spoken, the auction hall immediately fell silent. Gazes were trained on the transparent mountain rock, and as they shone, all sorts of expressions appeared on their faces. I don't have the ability to buy this item, and I don't want to buy it either. If you like it, you can buy it. I like to see just how you'll be able to keep yourself safe with a treasure that can die in your place once. Besides, without the unique methods of Enlightenment Gathering Tribe, this item is completely useless. The thin middle-aged man laughed eerily and sat down. He was secretly pleased with himself for doing the right thing. His words, along with his act of giving up on the stone, made it even more convincing. However, he did not expect that he had forgotten that his words had not only offended Su Ming alone. In fact, Su Ming was secondary. The person he offended was the mysterious person who brought this item to the auction. That person was the main target. Perhaps it would be difficult for the people in the land of freezing sky to search for this mysterious auctioneer, but it would be incredibly easy for Western Sea Clan. Besides, this person was in the auction hall. If Western Sea Clan believed in his words, then this person would immediately be in a bad situation. Uncertainty appeared on Su Ming's face. He looked at the mountain rock, then at the man from Enlightenment Gathering Tribe, then shook his head. Perhaps I was wrong about this item. If it's really as effective as you said, then I'll give up on this item. This sort of treasure can no longer be considered a treasure. It's a disaster that will cost me my life. Su Ming sighed. The instant Su Ming's words left his mouth, the man from Enlightenment Gathering Tribe was momentarily stunned. Soon, his expression changed, and he suddenly understood that there was something wrong with his words. At the same time, there was a man in black robes wearing a bamboo hat among the crowd in the auction hall. At that moment, his face was incredibly dark. He instinctively clenched his right hand, lifted his head, and killing intent appeared in his eyes. That killing intent was not directed towards Su Ming, but towards the thin man from Enlightenment Gathering Tribe. He was the person who had contacted Western Sea Clan to bring out the mountain rock. At that moment, his hatred towards this man from Enlightenment Gathering Tribe had reached a boiling point. This was the same as pushing him into a difficult position, and if he made the slightest mistake, he would not be able to walk out of Western Sea Clan's temporary tribe. He could even feel the strange look in the blue-haired old man's eyes when he occasionally swept his gaze towards him. Nonsense! The man stood up swiftly and floated in midair. His voice was like thunder that spread through the air. I was the one who brought this item to Western Sea Clan to be auctioned off. I've had this item for many years, and I've asked a lot of people about it. I might not have a detailed answer, but this item is definitely not some magnetic serene stone. It's just as my tribesman from the 9th room said, it only has one name, and that is Soul in Stone. Sir from Enlightenment Gathering Tribe, I won't let you off just because you said those words and try to harm me with evil intentions. I'd like to see just how Enlightenment Gathering Tribe will explain what happened today before all the people in the land of freezing sky. The man took off his bamboo hat and revealed a boorish face. He had no choice but to do this. If he still hid his face, then it would be even more difficult for him to explain what had happened. Everyone has seen my face. There's nothing for me to hide. Enlightenment Gathering Tribe. Once the auction ends, I'll invite Western Sea Clan to be my witness. We'll go together and see whether what you said is true or false. If it's false, then you'll have to give me a satisfactory explanation. There was anger on the boorish man's face. Once he said those words, he looked towards Su Ming, and the anger on his face disappeared. My tribesman from the 9th room told me about the specific uses of this item, but there are some details that I didn't know about before. Now, I finally know all of them. My tribesman, thank you for telling me the true uses of this item. I'll keep my promise, and I will definitely not lie to you. You bought this item for 1 million stone coins, and I'll give you 1 million stone coins, as well as the black crystal that I promised you. As he spoke, he immediately brought out a bag from his bosom and flung it towards Su Ming. Once Su Ming caught it, the man turned around and returned to his seat with a sullen look on his face. He felt his heart clench in pain, but he had to do this. If he did not give the mountain rock and the other items to Su Ming, then the persuasiveness of his words would be even lesser. At that moment, everyone saw him giving the mountain rock and the other items to Su Ming. It could be seen that while he was being magnanimous, he had also made other preparations. If what the person from Enlightenment Gathering Tribe said was true, and there was someone who could share his burden, then Western Sea Clan's target would shift to that person. Su Ming took the bag and cast a glance at it before putting it away in his bosom. He smiled and wrapped his fist in his palm towards the man, then brought out enough stone coins. Once he handed them to Ziche, he pointed towards the mountain rock in the auction hall. That item belongs to me now. Ziche, bring it to me. Ziche turned into a long arc and charged towards the center of the auction hall. With a wave of his arm, he brought the item back to the auction hall. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 3:22. Western Sea Clan's auction ended on that day. The items they brought out to be auctioned in the end may have been very attractive, but they did not attract much attention. During the 3 consecutive days of the auction, Su Ming's actions had attracted a lot of people's attention. It was especially so for the last incident related to the soul in the stone. It made quite a number of people have different thoughts. If what the man from Enlightenment Gathering Tribe said was true, then the value of that item was immeasurable. Even if what he said was false, judging by how excited he was at that time, that item was definitely a strange treasure. However, its true use was still a mystery. However, there were a lot of curious people. Although the Enlightenment Gathering Tribe's clansmen were restricted by the Western Sea sect and were unable to leave, and they had to return to Enlightenment Gathering Tribe with the original owner of the mountain rock, the burly man, and the people from the Western Sea sect to verify the authenticity of the Enlightenment Gathering Tribe's words. There were still a lot of people who left during the night to head to Enlightenment Gathering Tribe and use their own methods to investigate the truth of the matter. After all, most people would not recklessly offend Freezing Sky Clan before they obtained accurate information. The rumors surrounding the Ninth Summit were also the reason why people were cautious. Once Su Ming returned to his tent, he fell into a brief moment of thought before he arranged for Zi Che to pack his things. He had 2 great treasures on him, and he had already attracted a lot of attention. It was better for him to leave first than to stay here. However, he did not want to leave alone. Tian Lanming's help during the auction had caused the 2 of them to come to an agreement not to speak to each other directly. Besides, Su Ming did not harbor a lot of ill will towards Tian Lanming. Perhaps it's not impossible for me to work together with her during Sky Miss Shaman Hunt. As Ziche packed his tent, Su Ming stood on the snow and nodded his head in silence. Perhaps there really was a tacit understanding between them, or perhaps it was because Su Ming and Tian Lanming's acquaintance was related to painting, causing the 2 of them to have a faint connection to the art of creating pictures. As Su Ming was immersed in his thoughts while standing on the snow, a woman in white with her hair falling over her shoulders walked slowly on the snow in the drifting wind. Her footsteps were light and soft as she walked towards him. The woman was incredibly beautiful. She had bright eyes and white teeth. There was an elegant air about her as she walked in the wind and snow, and there was an indescribable charm about her that made her look like a painting. There were 2 people following behind her. One of them was the girl Su Ming had seen before, and the other was the man with the white mask who gave Su Ming the stone coins. The man had his head lowered. Not a hint of power could be detected from his body. He looked like a normal person, but when Su Ming looked at this person, he felt the same oppressive feeling he had when he stood on Sky Mist Barrier and looked at the land of the shamans. I was wondering whether you're going to leave. As he got closer, Tian Lanming's gentle voice traveled through the snow and drifted into his ears. When are you leaving? Su Ming turned his head around and looked at the woman walking towards him. The woman's beauty added a hint of charm to the snow and wind. It was as if her existence had attracted the snow and wind in the area to surround her, making her appear even more dazzling. I've spent tens of millions of stone coins on you, so of course I have to follow you at all times. Otherwise, if something were to happen to you, wouldn't my stone coins be wasted? The corners of Tian Lanming's lips curled up, and she smiled brightly. Her smile was like a blooming flower, causing all those who saw it to be unable to help themselves but feel their hearts race. Su Ming felt awkward, which was a rare sight. He was not used to this sort of conversation, especially when he was talking to his creditor. We're not in a hurry to leave. The auction isn't over yet. The real auction will start soon. Don't you want to go take a look? Tian Lanming blinked. She found Su Ming's expression very interesting at that moment. Even if I go, I won't be able to afford it. Su Ming smiled wryly. It's fine. I have some. You already owe me quite a lot of stone coins. I don't mind if you owe me a little more. Besides, the feeling of being a creditor is pretty good. There was a hint of smugness in Tian Lanming's smile that was rarely seen on her. However, the girl behind her looked at Su Ming with disdain and disdain. She rolled her eyes at him and looked elsewhere. Besides, I wasn't invited. Su Ming hesitated for a moment. He had heard of this auction that belonged to the powerful. Compared to the auction that lasted for 3 days, this sort of small-scale auction was another important part of the clash between the 2 clans that happened once every century. As he hesitated, Su Ming's expression suddenly changed, and he lifted his head to look into the distance. Almost at the same time he lifted his head, Tian Lanming also looked over. A man dressed in black with an aloof expression on his face walked towards them. Wherever he went, not a single footprint would be left on the ground, but his feet were indeed stepping on snow. The man in black stopped 100 feet away from Su Ming. Once he cast Su Ming a cold glance. A powerful pressure appeared in his eyes. That was the pressure of those in the bone sacrifice realm. Under that pressure, The snow around them was immediately lifted up as if it was swept away by a violent gust of wind, covering the man's and Su Ming's gazes. "The master has invited me." The man in black only said these 4 words, and his voice was like a freezing gust of wind. As he spoke, he brought out a wooden plate from his bosom with his right hand and flung it at Su Ming before he turned around and left. Su Ming caught the wooden plate. There was not a hint of force on it. Once he caught it lightly, a rebounding force spread out abruptly. That rebounding force surged into Su Ming's body, causing 6 muffled booms to ring out under his feet and snow to fly into the air once again. Su Ming's expression was calm as he took the wooden plate and cast it a glance. Tian Lanming's eyes brightened by his side. She looked at Su Ming's feet, and the smile on her lips grew wider. 1 Chi9 bursts. This is one of the few skills the great tribe of Freezing Sky doesn't teach to outsiders. This person is from the great tribe of Freezing Sky and is the retainer of the elder's second son. The person who spoke was the person with the white mask standing behind Tian Lanming. That person's voice was old and sounded like an old man's. The person in the third room is the second young master of the great tribe of Freezing Sky. "Now that you've been invited, let's go together." Tian Lanming chuckled softly. Her voice was very pleasant to the ears. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he nodded. As Tian Lanming smiled, the two of them walked towards the deeper parts of the tribe with the wind and snow blowing in their faces. There was a gigantic golden tent located right at the center of the tribe. Ziche and the girl followed behind them. The girl found Su Ming an eyesore, and it was the same for Ziche. With an arrogant look on her face, she insisted on walking in front of Ziche. As for the old man with the white mask, he walked at the very back. Most of the time, he looked at Tian Lanming lovingly, but occasionally, he would shift his gaze to Su Ming, as if he was examining him. "That's right. Where's the little tail beside you? I remember that she came with you." As Tian Lanming walked with Su Ming, she looked at him with a smile, and her voice was like a lingering echo in the air. "Little tail." Su Ming was momentarily stunned. The image of Bai Su's pale face before she left appeared in his mind. Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he spoke slowly. "She left. It's good that she left. She's infatuated with Si Ma Xian. It's a form of pain for her to be sent to your side, but it's also a good thing for her to see herself clearly." The smile on Tian Lanming's face was gone as she spoke softly. Su Ming cast a glance at Tian Lanming and did not speak. "Are you questioning how I know? Sima Xin can only think of this method with all his little tricks. The hearts of people are different because of their Daos. Those with the great Tao will look at the sky and the earth, and those with the minor Tao will look at others and themselves," Tian Lanming said calmly as she twirled a few strands of her hair. "You've gained a little more epiphany compared to the last time we met." As Su Ming walked on the snow, the sound of him stepping on the snow traveled into his ears. He liked that sound a lot. "I have to thank you for giving up on the crane made of grass. I could feel it looking at you when it was flying in the air." Tian Lanming smiled sweetly. There were a few snowflakes stuck to her smiling face, causing her skin to look like it was made of cream, giving off a feeling that her skin was as smooth as ice. As the two of them spoke, they arrived outside the golden tent located at the center of the tribe. The instant they stepped into the tent, an invisible ripple swept past them. When it touched the wooden plate in Su Ming's hands, the ripple rippled, and Su Ming's vision blurred. When his vision cleared up, he found himself in a dark room that was about 100 feet in size. There were quite a number of tables on both sides of the room. At that moment, there were already a dozen people sitting there. Their faces could not be seen clearly, and everything was just a blur. It was clear that they had already hidden themselves. These people did not talk to each other. All of them were sitting quietly, and when Su Ming and Tian Lanming arrived, they swept their gazes towards them. Su Ming's heart tensed up. All of the gazes that looked towards him brought with them an incredible amount of pressure. This pressure was definitely not something that a normal berserker in the bone sacrifice realm could bring about. In fact, some of the gazes that swept past him even made Su Ming's heart tremble. This sort of gaze only belonged to those in the Berserker soul realm. However, there were also a few gazes that swept past him, and they were all very normal. They will look at us the way we look at them. Unless we intentionally spread our power outwards, they won't be able to see our true power. A gentle voice suddenly appeared in Su Ming's mind. That voice belonged to Tian Lanmeng. She stood beside Su Ming, and her face was also a blur. Su Ming fell silent. Once he cast a glance at Tian Lanmeng, the two of them sat on the chairs to the right and waited for the others to arrive. Before long, more people appeared in the room. Most of them were familiar with the rules, and they walked towards the empty chairs. An hour later, when all the chairs were filled and there were nearly 20 people in the room, Tian Lanmeng's voice echoed in Su Ming's mind once again. It's starting. Almost at the instant Tian Lanmeng's words turned into echoes in Su Ming's mind, a hearty laughter traveled out from the rather dark room. As that laughter appeared, a boy walked out from the wall right at the front of the room, as if he had walked through the wall. The boy looked to be only 7 or 8 years old, but his voice was like a tidal wave, and his words were filled with experience and ruthlessness. All of you are my old friends. There might be some of you who are new, but since you're here, then you must know the rules. I'll make a long story short. I won't waste my breath. According to tradition, Western Sea Clan will be the first to start the game. The first item I'll bring out is a living creature. As the boy spoke, he lifted his right hand and swung his arm before him. Immediately, a black chain shot out with a howl. There was a living creature chained to the other end of the chain. Its movements were too quick. Once it appeared, it immediately charged forward as if it wanted to escape, but its neck was bound by the chain. When it reached a spot not too far away from Su Ming, the chain was pulled taut and wrapped around its neck, causing the living creature to let out pained wails. The moment Su Ming saw the living creature, he felt as if he had been struck by hundreds of thousands of lightning bolts. His mind roared, and in an instant, besides the living creature, everything else before him disappeared. Recommendation votes are a common topic. My mouth is torn. I beg for recommendation votes. I beg for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Yen. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 323. It was an ape. It was a dark red ape with a crazed look on its face. Its neck was bound tightly by a chain. Ulcers had even appeared on the fur under the chain, and some of its flesh had already fused with the chain. The chains were now stretched taut by the ape's galloping, making it difficult for the ape to even breathe. However, it was still frantically trying to break free from the restraints of the chains. Its dark red fur did not seem to be its original color, but was instead caused by being dirty for a long period of time. If it was completely washed, then the red at the tip of its fur would be a fiery red. It was not big, only the size of a child of 3 or 4 years old. At that moment, it was sprawled on the ground and howling at the area around it. There was terror and hatred hidden in its eyes as it looked at its surroundings, and its body trembled. Su Ming trembled. He looked at the fiery red ape before him, and booming sounds reverberated in his head. He forgot where he was, and everything before him turned into a picture buried deep within his memories. In that image, a young man dressed in animal skin was laughing happily as he jumped up and down in the mountain forest. On the young man's shoulder was a fiery red monkey. One of its hands was tightly gripping onto the young man's hair, while the other hand was holding onto a fruit pit. It was gnawing on it, and occasionally it would make squeaking sounds, but the sound was also filled with joy. This is a mutated fire ape. This ape loves fire, so it's impossible for it to live in a land of freezing sky. Even within the territory of Western Sea Clan, we've never seen it before. I've even checked some ancient scrolls, and the climate and environment in the entire land of South Morning are not suitable for this fire ape to live in. That's why I call this ape a mutated species. It's incredibly rare. I don't know whether it's the only one of its kind, but over the years, I've only seen this one. The boy smiled and cast the fire ape a glance before speaking languidly. It's just a monkey. Aren't you placing too much importance on it by bringing it out to be auctioned off here? A piercing voice came from the people sitting by the side. The person who spoke was indistinct, and his face could not be seen clearly. This isn't an ordinary ape. It's so fast that even if I were to chase after it, I would have to expend quite a bit of effort. Also, the blood of this ape can extend one's lifespan, and if one consumes it frequently, one's cultivation will improve. However, the most important thing was that this monkey was extremely rare. If its soul was extracted and absorbed into a weapon, then the weapon's power of fire would be shocking. Also, this ape was extremely strong and could fight against those at the bone sacrifice realm. It's not bad to use it to guard the cave, and it might even be able to transform, the boy said slowly. No one else might have noticed Su Ming's trembling, but Tianlan Meng, who was by his side, saw it with just one glance. Her face was calm, but there were questions in her heart. She looked at the ape, then at Su Ming. She could not imagine why Su Ming would act this way. Su Ming ignored the people's words. He looked at the ape, and after a long, long while, he closed his eyes. It's a pity that this ape is so stubborn and unruly. I've tried everything I can, but I can't tame it completely. I've even suppressed it under the sea mountain, but it didn't yield at all, or else I wouldn't have been willing to sell it, the boy said with a rather sentimental tone. The boy sighed with emotion. After introducing the ape, he took out a few other items and explained their effects one by one. Each of the items he brought out would definitely stir up a ruckus in the auction hall during the day, but in this place, they did not stir up too much of a commotion. At most, they would only attract a few more gazes. However, those who could come to this small auction hall were all cunning people. Their faces had become indistinct, and no one could see them. Even if they could see them, they would not be able to find any clues from their expressions. Those who could reach the later stage of the bone sacrifice realm, or even the berserker soul realm, were definitely people who had gone through countless life and death situations. Those who could survive this sort of test were definitely not ordinary people. Those who lacked intelligence would not have been able to survive until now. Su Ming did not hear the items the boy brought out after that. He closed his eyes and quelled the raging emotions in his heart. The first item to appear in this small auction had caught him completely off guard. It descended so suddenly, causing Su Ming's heart to feel as if it was in a storm. Before he could accept it, it had already appeared before his eyes. Xiao Hong. A trembling voice echoed in Su Ming's heart. Xiao Hong had been like family to him during his time in Dark Mountain. It had accompanied him throughout his childhood, and it had borne all of his joys, sorrows, and joys. The scenes of him getting to know Xiao Hong, the scenes of them playing together, the scenes of him talking to Xiao Hong when he was lonely, all of these scenes appeared in Su Ming's head. His childhood memories were filled with beautiful moments, and in those beautiful moments, there was always a fiery red figure that accompanied him as he grew up, accompanied him to search for Bai Ling, and accompanied him to steal Dark Dragon saliva. Most of the time, Xiao Hong was Su Ming's only audience when he was talking to himself, even though every single time he did that, Xiao Hong would hold onto a fruit by his side and throw away the core. Su Ming would never forget all of this. He still remembered one of Xiao Hong's actions. It would sniff at the fruit with an intoxicated look on its face. That look was deeply imprinted in Su Ming's memory. Su Ming still remembered that he had once followed Xiao Hong to investigate the matter in secret, and he had seen Xiao Hong grabbing the bear's fur, and everything else. When Dark Mountain changed, when the void appeared and Su Ming was swept into it, when he opened his eyes once again, Dark Mountain was no longer around. The elder was no longer around. The tribe was no longer around. Xiao Hong was also no longer around. The sky was not the sky of the Alliance of the Western region, and the earth was not the land of the Alliance of the Western region. Everything was unfamiliar, so unfamiliar that it was enough to force a person to grow up quickly, to get used to silence, and to learn how to kill ruthlessly. Only in the dead of night could he sit in a corner and look at the sky alone, count his memories, and accompany his loneliness. Su Ming opened his eyes, and the moment he did so, everything around him seemed to have recovered from its silence. The fire ape's wails reached his ears, along with the boy's voice and some of the people who were offering a price. Su Ming saw the ape with the dark red fur struggling nonstop, as if it could not breathe. It gave up on the thought of escaping and instead crouched down on the ground with grief on its face. Its gaze was no longer in the area, and its soul was no longer in its body. It was as if it had left to a place far away, and no one knew what it was thinking about. Su Ming looked at it and felt a sharp pain in his heart. That pain drowned him like a tidal wave. Even though he could tell that this ape was not Xiao Hong, it had the same agility as Xiao Hong, similar fur, and the same speed. However, Su Ming had been with Xiao Hong for many years, and he could tell that this was a fire ape based on some of the minute details, but it was still not Xiao Hong. It was just not Bai Su, it was not Bai Ling. When Su Ming looked at the ape, it seemed to have noticed that there was one person among the dozen-something people it hated and loathed that had been staring at it since the beginning. That person's gaze was different from the others. There was no aloofness in his gaze, but a form of grief. It had also seen a few gazes like this after it was captured. However, in its memories, when it saw those gazes, the grief in those gazes was almost always filled with sympathy and pity. It did not need this sort of pity. However, that person's gaze was slightly different. The highly intelligent ape that was crouching down on the ground turned its head around and looked towards the direction of the gaze. It saw an indistinct figure and the gaze that was looking at it. There was no sympathy in that gaze, neither was there pity. There was only pure grief, and that grief made the ape shudder. This ape can't be bartered for a loan. Its value can vary. How about this? I'll use a wisp of starlight that I've refined for nearly 100 years in exchange for your 2C creation stones. I don't have starlight, but I obtained the skeleton of a shaman tribe's sacred beast in the past. I refined it into a puppet, but the puppet's value surpasses the items you have. Give me another 10 drops of Western Sea Clan's sea marrow, and I'll give it to you in exchange. This was an auction Su Ming had never seen before. They did not use stone coins to bid for items, but used items to trade for other items. There was no such thing as the highest bidder getting the item. The person who traded with the person would depend on what the person who brought out the item lacked. The person's will could decide everything. I can refine starlight myself, even though it'll take some time. As for the shaman tribe's sacred beast puppet, if I put some effort into it, it's not as if I can't get it from the shaman tribe. I want some rare items. If you don't have them, then forget it. The boy shook his head, for items floated before him. One of them was a jade bottle, and the other 3 were a small umbrella and 2 black stones. Based on his introduction, just now, the jade bottle contained sea marrow. He did not mention its effects, but judging by the words of the people around him, most of them seemed to know about it. As for the small umbrella, it was an enchanted treasure with a unique effect. It could make a person's presence disappear completely. The last 2 black stones were sea creation stones. Its effects were just as its name suggested. It could create an ocean out of thin air, and it possessed great power. Besides these 4 items, the fire ape was the only other item. However, there were not many among the dozen people who were interested in the items the boy brought out. Only the 2 people who were offering a price, but they could not satisfy the boy. Is there no one who has any rare items? If there isn't, then the next person will have to take the treasure. The boy was slightly disappointed. Once he swept his gaze past the people around him, he was just about to retrieve his item. Yet at that moment, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he spoke. Wait, I'll trade for it with sky pearls. Almost the moment Su Ming spoke, Tian Lanmeng's voice came from beside him at the same time. The 2 of them could be said to have spoken at the same time, causing the boy to immediately look over once he heard it. The first person he looked at was not Su Ming, but Tian Lanmeng, who was standing beside him. The boy looked at Tian Lanmeng and asked with a smile, "How many sky pearls do you want?" To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 3:24. How many do you want? Tian Lanmeng asked calmly and at a moderate pace. A glint appeared in the boy's eyes, and he said with a smile, "Lass, you must be one of the mist priests of this generation chosen by Sky Mist's ancestor. Your name is Tian Lanmeng, and your elder sister is Tian Lan Yu. Every generation of Sky Mist family's mist priests must be sent to Freezing Sky and Western Sea. One of them will be chosen to receive the descent of Sky Mist's ancestor. I respect Sky Mist. If you want these things, then give me 10 heaven pearls. The boy's words echoed in the dark room. The people around didn't stare at him. Most of them ignored him. 10. Tian Lan Meng hesitated. She looked at the 4 items before the old man, then at the dark red ape. She remained silent for a moment. I can only give you 2, Tian Lan Meng said softly. That won't do, little miss. You need at least 5 heavenly jewels before you can gather them together. 2 isn't enough, and you won't be able to exchange for anything else in here. Unless you have some rare items, I'm very interested in any rare items. The boy smiled. He swept his gaze across the area before his eyes landed on Su Ming. He remembered that Su Ming had also spoken just now. A rare item. Su Ming closed his eyes, then opened them after a moment. Just as Tian Lan Meng was about to speak, Su Ming pressed his hand on her arm. There was no way he did not know that Tian Lan Meng had offered a price because she saw the change in him when the ape appeared. Su remembered her kind intentions. He could also tell that this sky pearl was definitely an incredibly valuable item, and it was the same for Tian Lan Meng. He could choose to give up. In fact, he did not pay too much attention to the boy's other items, but he could not choose to ignore this ape. Although, it was not Little Red. I have a rare item, but whether or not you can figure out its use will depend on your eyesight. Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the boy. The difference between their levels of cultivation was incredibly great, but at that moment, Su Ming was not afraid. This was a trade, and, at the very least, the 2 of them were in the same position in the dark room. If he was afraid first, if he was intimidated by the other party's cultivation, then there would be no need to discuss any deal. Oh, the boy cast Su Ming a lazy glance with the ghost of a smile on his face. He truly did not believe that the person who spoke before him could bring out anything that would make him curious. He was a member of Western Sea Clan. He might not know the name list for the auction, but the people sitting together with Tian Lan Meng were either powerful berserkers from the Tian Lan family or her friends. Clearly, judging by their actions, the person who spoke did not seem to be a member of Tian Lan Meng. Then, there was only one explanation for it. This person was Tian Lan Meng's friend, and judging by his tone, he did not sound old. His level of cultivation was definitely not too high either. At most, he was only in the bone sacrifice realm. You can take it out and have a look. Perhaps there really is something I don't know about. The boy did not speak too confidently. That was just how he was, but it was not because he valued Su Ming highly. Su Ming no longer wasted his breath. He reached into his bosom with his right hand and brought out an item from his storage bag. When he held that item in his hand, he hesitated for a moment. When he swept his gaze past the items before the old man and the ape, he swiftly brought out the item, held it in his palm, and threw it towards the boy before him. It was a round item. Once the boy caught it, he brought it before his eyes and cast a glance at it. Once he saw it, the boy's expression instantly turned serious. He lifted his right hand and swung it before him. Immediately, the area before him became indistinct. That indistinct layer surrounded his body, causing the people to be unable to see what he was doing inside. However, the auction was hosted by Western Sea Clan, and the standards of the auction were very high. The chances of someone embezzling an item was next to none. The boy's level of cultivation was also incredibly high, and it did not matter whether it was his status or status. He was one of the best in Western Sea Clan. It was only natural that he would not want to lower himself to snatch an item belonging to a member of the younger generation in front of the crowd. That was why, while that indistinct layer of light was visible to others, it was completely useless to Su Ming and Tian Lan Meng. This was naturally the boy's way of doing things. Su Ming could see the boy bringing the round item to his nose and sniffing it. His expression changed once again, and he stared at the item hesitantly. His expression changed several times. Su Ming looked at the item in the boy's hands and felt his heart clench in pain. That item was his spirit plunder. This was the only thing he could bring out, and it could be considered as a rare item. What is this? The boy hesitated for a moment before lifting his head and looking at Su Ming. "Can I exchange it for your things?" Su Ming asked in a low voice. "Yes, but the effect of this item is the most important." The boy looked at Su Ming and spoke sternly. "I don't know the name of this item, but its function is very simple. It can absorb all illusions, just like absorbing berserker marks. In fact, there's even a shaman's totem within it." Su Ming sighed and spoke slowly. "I see. I was wondering why I sensed a hint of the shaman's presence when I was observing it just now. This item might not be very useful and there's a crack on it, but there must be a limit to how much it can absorb. Once it exceeds the limit, it'll shatter. However, this item is indeed a rare item, but you can't exchange for all my items. How about this? Excluding the sea marrow, you can only choose one of the 4 items, including the fire ape." The boy nodded his head with a grave expression. "I'm not trying to bully you. It's just that this item is only a rare item, but there's a crack on it, so it's already incomplete. It can't absorb too many new illusions. To me, its greatest use is just to study it." The boy cast Su Ming a glance and explained, "But if you still have this item, then we can talk." Once the boy finished speaking, he gave Su Ming a profound smile. "I only have one of these." Su Ming swept his gaze past the boy's items, and when his gaze fell on the fire ape, he averted his gaze. "My master gave it to me." Su Ming continued speaking, and once he averted his gaze, he looked at the boy. "Oh, who's your master?" The boy asked nonchalantly as he toyed with the spirit plunder in his hand with a smile on his face. "My master is Tian Xiezi. He's very protective." Su Ming did not hide his identity. This was something that was very difficult to hide. If Western Sea Clan wanted to know, then it would not be too difficult for them to find out in the secret auction room they held. More importantly, Su Ming had a vague feeling that there was something off about Tian Xiezi's identity. He had already sensed this when he was dressed in purple, and his trip to the land of the shamans made him even more certain of his suspicions. Su Ming also found something suspicious about the large-scale auction held during the day. First, it was the actions of the Western Sea Clan elder. Then it was the friendly gesture from the great tribe of Freezing Sky's second young master. Su Ming did not believe that he was the one who caused all of this. The smile on the boy's face instantly froze when he heard Su Ming mention Tian Xiezi's name. That nonchalant look on his face instantly turned into one of shock. He lowered his head and looked at the spirit plunder in his hand, then at Su Ming. A wry smile appeared on his face. "You're the 9th Summit's Su Ming. Heir, send my regards to Senior Tian Xiezi. Oh well, you can choose one more item from these." The boy shook his head. Su Ming's heart pounded against his chest. Just as he was about to speak, Tian Lanming let out a fake cough. "I want the fire ape and 5 drops of sea marrow." The boy hesitated for a moment before he shook his head and said, "I can give you the fire ape, but I can't give you so much sea marrow. 3 drops, and that's because of Senior Tian Xiezi." Tian Lanming winked at Su Ming and quickly said, "All right, 3 drops it is." The boy did not waste any more words. He lifted his right hand and grabbed the jade bottle. Once he opened it, he flung it forward, and immediately 3 drops of azure blue liquid flew toward Su Ming. Tian Lanming quickly lifted her hand, and an ice bottle appeared in her hand. Once she accurately placed the 3 drops of liquid into the bottle, the color of the ice bottle instantly turned dark blue. Soon after, the boy waved his arm, and a chain flew toward Su Ming, who caught it. The moment he held the chain, his heart trembled. A feeling that he could control the fire ape's life and death at the end of the chain rose in his heart. It was as if with just one thought, the fire ape would immediately die. "I'll lend you this chain for now, but you can't keep it for too long. Find a way to control the fire ape as soon as possible. Once you do, throw the chain into the sky. It will return to my side on its own. This ape is brutal. You have to be careful." Once the boy finished speaking, the blur before him disappeared, causing the others to be able to see his face and hear his voice. As for the conversation between the 3 of them and their expressions just now, the others could not detect it. They did not see it. This was a unique feature of this small auction. It could provide protection for those who wanted to trade alone. Most of the people sitting by the side did not pay too much attention to them. Only a few of them cast a few glances at Su Ming and Tian Lanming. It was difficult for Su Ming to tell what they were thinking from their gazes. After all, compared to these people, Su Ming was still a little green. Su Ming did not participate in the subsequent auctions. Instead, he looked at the rare items brought out by the people. There were quite a number of them that could make Su Ming's heart pound, but he did not have any items to trade. Only a few people would bring out stone coins to trade. Most of them wanted to trade for other items. I won't bring out a lot of items. There's only one. Everyone had the chance to bring out an item they wanted to auction. They could also choose what they wanted to trade for it. At that moment, the person who spoke was a person sitting on the other side of Su Ming. That person's body was indistinct and he could not be seen clearly. His voice was not old. Instead, it sounded rather airy, as if there was a certain rhythm to it. As he spoke, he lifted his right hand and pointed forward. Immediately, the air where he pointed immediately distorted and a small bottle floated out from within. The moment the bottle appeared, it gradually became transparent. The mouth of the bottle opened on its own, and a medicinal fragrance spread out and filled the dark room. As the bottle slowly became transparent, all the people's gazes focused on it. They could clearly see that there were 4 round objects the size of fingernails within the bottle. Medicinal pills. Su Ming did not expect that in this small auction, there would be 2 items that shocked him so much that his heart was about to explode. Seeking for Fiend has been on the shelves for 100 days, and you have been by my side. Thank you. Purple Flame Flying Snow, Contemplation, Guanshu Modeled, Old Wong is still single. Evil Little Red Flower, Kai Weiwei, YVHK, Into the World, and the 8 Alliance Masters for their great support. Each of you will be given a set of Divine General Armor to ward off all evil and ensure your smooth journey. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 325. It will be released tomorrow. There will be many strong people on the monthly votes list, and it will not be easy to fight for it. But if I don't fight for it, I will constantly be overtaken. No matter what, I must fight for it. Today, I will have an epiphany. I must fight. I must snatch. I must draw my sword. It will be released tomorrow, and 4 chapters will be the base. If the monthly votes reach 300, and if there is such an incentive, I will write the 5th chapter. If it reaches 400, I will write the 6th chapter, and so on. There is no limit. Urge me to write, and how much to write is in your hands. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 326. The medicinal fragrance filled the dark room and spread outwards, causing all those who took a whiff of it to feel refreshed. Su Ming looked at the 4 medicinal pills in the transparent bottle. They were green, and the interior of the bottle looked rather illusory. It was as if the appearance of these 4 medicinal pills did not fit in with the surroundings. For 2nd grade shaman course, I've tested them myself, and they are for healing. The person beside Su Ming took out the medicinal pills and sat down before speaking languidly. Shaman course. Su Ming's expression was calm, but his heart was shaken. The auction this time had allowed him to learn about many things that he did not know in the past. At that moment, he stared at the transparent jade bottle and fell silent. You managed to snatch a shaman core from the hands of the shaman priests? Interesting, but I don't really believe that it's a 2nd grade shaman core. A dark voice traveled forth. The person who spoke was one of the people sitting across from Su Ming. As he spoke, he lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the jade bottle. Immediately, the bottle charged towards that person. He grabbed it in his hand and poured out one of the medicinal pills inside, then brought it to his nose and sniffed it. The person beside Su Ming did not stop him from doing this. Clearly, this sort of action was very common in the auction. He was not worried that the shaman core would be taken away. Some of the other people around him also took out the medicinal pills from the air and examine them. Usually, they would only look at it for a moment before putting it back into the bottle. There were quite a number of people who examined it. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He waited for a moment, and when he saw that no one was looking at it, he lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the medicinal bottle. Immediately, the bottle flew towards him. He poured out a medicinal pill, and after a few scrutinizing glances at it, he chose to sniff it as well. A medicinal fragrance wafted into his nose, but there was a hint of blood within that fragrance. As he stared at the item, Su Ming was certain that this was a medicinal pill, but it was not one of the ones he knew. The method of creating it was also clearly a little crude. It looked round and smooth like a core, but if anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see that there were numerous small holes on it. It was not as natural as the medicinal pills Su Ming created. When the lizard shaman tribe's patriarch saw spirit plunder during the trip to the land of the shamans, he cried out about the barren core. By the looks of it, the shamans do indeed have a method similar to mine to create medicinal pills. However, the method I learned is called medicinal pills, and the shaman tribe's items are known as shaman cores. By the looks of it, these shamans are still a little inferior compared to my medicinal pills. Su Ming placed the shaman core in the bottle and pushed it forward before him. He sat and did not make a sound. These few wizard cores did not cause a large-scale fight, but there were a few people who concealed the attention of the bystanders and exchanged some unknown items for these few wizard cores while conversing in private. The small-scale auction had been going on for a long time. Su Ming gave up on the chance to bring out his items to be auctioned. He had nothing to sell, and it was the same for Tian Meng. After another hour, the small-scale auction came to an end. This was the first time Su Ming joined such a high-profile private gathering. Most of the items brought out by the people were things he did not know about and had never heard of. As the private gathering ended, Su Ming might not have gained much, but the memories of those valuable items were still fresh in his mind. If he did not have this sort of chance, then he would have needed a long time to gain this sort of knowledge. Once the private gathering ended, the boy waved his arm, and the people standing by the sides of the square turned into illusions before they gradually became transparent and eventually disappeared without a trace. The way to enter this place was through the Golden Tent, but there were a dozen-something golden tents in Western Sea Clan. It was not necessary to enter the largest golden tent in the center. That was why when the people appeared, most of them would split up and quickly leave once they walked out of the golden tent. Su Ming and Tian Meng walked out of the golden tent. There was a chain in Su Ming's hand, and at the end of the chain was a fire ape with dark red fur. The ape had just walked out of the tent and lifted its head to look at the sky. It looked at the snow falling down from the sky and started trembling. "Brother Su, this bag can contain living creatures. Hurry up and put away the fire ape. We have to leave this place immediately." The moment they walked out of the golden tent, and Zi Che and Tian Meng's attendants went up to them, Tian Meng spoke to Su Ming anxiously. At the same time, she brought out a small white bag and handed it to Su Ming. Su Ming did not hesitate. Once he took the small bag, he scanned it with his divine sense and patted it lightly. Immediately, a great suction force came from within and swept up the fire ape, sucking it into the small bag. "Let's go." Tian Meng moved and turned into a long arc that rose into the sky. Su Ming lifted his foot and took a step forward. Even if Tian Meng had flown up first, with that one step, Su Ming was already parallel to her as she charged forward in midair. Zi Che and the girl followed behind the two of them. As for the man with the white mask, he was walking slowly at the very back. His movements were neither fast nor slow, and he looked incredibly relaxed. The group of people turned into several long arcs in the sky and gradually disappeared into the distance. No one spoke along the way. Su Ming was immersed in his own thoughts and would occasionally lower his head to look at the small white bag. He still had an indescribable feeling towards the fire ape in the bag. The instant he saw the fire ape, his heart had been shaken, and complicated feelings had even appeared in his heart. He hoped that the ape was Xiao Hong, but it was also difficult for him to accept the fact that this was the truth. When he saw that the ape was not Xiao Hong, his longing and melancholy towards Xiao Hong appeared in his heart. In the midst of these complicated feelings, he charged forward silently with Tian Lan Meng. The sky brightened up. Once they were quite a distance away from Western Sea Clan's temporary tribe, Tian Lan Meng turned her head around and cast Su Ming a glance. The item you used to exchange for the fire ape was also a shaman core. Tian Lan Meng's voice was gentle. No one else could hear her words, but they echoed in Su Ming's mind. Su Ming had experienced this method of speaking during the private meeting. It was very strange. This is a simple art used by the immortals. It sounds simple, but it's very difficult for berserkers to master. Tian Lan Meng smiled at Su Ming. She could tell that Su Ming was puzzled by this type of sound transmission art. You don't have to answer me. I don't know whether you know where it came from. If you do, then it's fine, but if you don't, then you know now. But your shaman core is very unique. It's very different from the ones I've seen before. If I hadn't seen a lot of shaman cores before, it would have been difficult for me to recognize it. That boy from Western Sea Clan thought he had seen a lot of things, but he couldn't tell where this item came from with just one glance. Tian Lan Meng's smile was very beautiful. As she smiled, her eyes turned into crescent moons, and it added a feeling that made people's hearts pound. Su Ming carefully sensed Tian Lan Meng's voice echoing in his heart. With his divine sense, he could vaguely tell that the voice was transmitted through qi. That qi was not the power of his blood, but another form of power that existed in the world. It would be difficult for other people to notice this power, but it was not the case for Su Ming. There was a path that had been opened up in his body, and the qi flowing within that path was precisely that qi. He had sensed it before and had even named it the art of refinement. After a moment of pensive silence, a wisp of qi circulated within the open path in Su Ming's body. The moment it spread outwards, it fused with his divine sense. As his divine sense spread out and touched Tian Lan Meng, Su Ming gained an epiphany, and a smile appeared on his face. Perhaps that's not the case. Su Ming did not open his mouth when he said those words. Instead, his voice echoed in Tian Lan Meng's mind. Oh, huh. Tian Lan Meng did not manage to register what was going on in the beginning, but soon she was stunned. Her eyes went wide, and her body came to an abrupt halt. She looked at Su Ming with surprise and disbelief on her face. Were you the one who spoke just now? Tian Lan Meng hesitated for a moment. That's right. I said perhaps that's not the case, Su Ming replied. You learn too quickly. Tian Lan Meng cast Su Ming a strange look before she continued charging forward. After some time, Tian Lan Meng could not help but ask, How did you do it? I did it how you did it. It wasn't something difficult to begin with. It was easy once I got the hang of it. Su Ming smiled faintly and replied, If you don't want to tell me, then so be it. But it's a good thing for us that you can do this. Su Ming, I need your help during Sky Mist Hunt. A grave look appeared on Tian Lan Meng's face. Tell me the details. Su Ming sighed. He could no longer refuse. After all, what happened during the auction had turned her into his creditor. Tian Lan Meng looked at Su Ming and spoke after a moment of hesitation. This isn't the time for us to talk about the details. Once Sky Mist Shaman Hunt starts, I'll tell you in detail. Once you help me this time, not only will you not owe me any more stone coins, I'll even thank you in other ways. All right, but I have to say this first. No matter how dangerous this is, as long as it's beyond my abilities and my life is in danger, I will choose to give up. As for the stone coins I owe you, I'll think of a way to pay you back, Su Ming said in a low voice. All right. Tian Lan Meng smiled and nodded toward Su Ming. Time passed by as the two of them continued sending their thoughts to each other. When dusk arrived, the group did not run into any danger on their way back to Freezing Sky Clan. Tian Lan Meng looked at the 9 summits on the ground not too far away from them and brought out a clear blue ice bottle from her bosom. Once she poured out a drop of blue liquid, she placed it into another ice bottle. There are 3 drops of sea marrow. I'll take one as interest and return the other 2 to you. This thing is very valuable. Once you take 1 drop, you'll gain a large amount of life force. It's a life-saving item. As Tian Lan Meng spoke, She handed the ice bottle containing the 2 drops of sea marrow to Su Ming. With this, our chances of success during Sky Mist Shaman Hunt will be higher. As she spoke, Tian Lan Meng smiled at Su Ming once again and turned into a long arc that flew towards the 7th summit. The girl followed behind her. As for the man with the white mask, he had already disappeared. Su Ming looked at Tian Lan Meng's departing figure, then lowered his head to look at the ice bottle in his hands before he turned around and flew towards the 9th summit with Ziche. There were less than 2 months until Sky Mist Shaman Hunt. I'll release my first chapter today, and I'll release at least 4 chapters today. How many chapters one can release will depend on everyone's monthly votes. I'm already prepared to give my all. I beg for monthly votes. I beg for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 327. It was a matter of urgency. 2 months was an incredibly short period of time for Su Ming. There was a high possibility that one epiphany would naturally pass by, and he might not even have enough time to isolate himself for training. Besides, it was not 2 months. More accurately speaking, it was around 1.5 months. The entire Freezing Sky clan was in a state of silence before the storm. This did not mean that the people were quiet, but it was a state of mind, a feeling. All those who wanted to join Sky Mist Shaman Hunt were making their final preparations. Perhaps they were looking forward to shocking the world in one go, or perhaps they were looking forward to dying in a foreign land. The great battle of the berserkers and shamans that happened once every 100 years would usually cause Sky Mist to be drenched in blood. Once he returned to the 9th summit, Su Ming made his decision. Before Sky Mist Shaman Hunt, he would not leave the 9th summit. He would use this final period of time to make his final preparations. He had too many things he needed to do. Hefeng's fusion had reached a critical moment. This was the final metamorphosis. Once he succeeded, Hefeng would become Su Ming's powerful guard during Sky Mist Shaman Hunt. There was also the matter of creating spirit plunder. Now that he had enough materials, Su Ming needed the aura of death to create spirit plunder. Once he had enough, he would be ready for the battle in the land of the shamans. Besides that, he also needed to study the barren cauldron he obtained. After all, if he did not open it, he could not use it to create other medicinal pills. The Battle of Sky Mist would last for several years, or even longer. That was why he needed to prepare a large amount of medicinal pills, or else, if anything happened, it would be fatal. There was also the matter of Su Ming's own power. The divine general armor required him to spend more time making the black mist form the rune so that it would become sturdier. The second style of picture creation and the explosive speed of the golden rock would also require Su Ming to refine his body even more. Only by doing so would he be able to withstand an even faster speed. There was also the chance Su Ming could sense for himself to break through from the later stage of the Transcendence Realm to the great completion of the Transcendence Realm. He needed to retrieve the Sun that was sent to be repaired and play the song from Dark Mountain so that he could attain completion in the Transcendence Realm. Su Ming had to make all these preparations. As for Sima Xian, he no longer had the time to pay attention to him. The instant he failed to plant the Berserker seed in him, he lost his courage to fight against Su Ming head-on. By Su Ming sat cross-legged on the stone platform outside his cave abode, and Bai Su's figure appeared in his head. That figure gradually faded away in his head until it disappeared. Once he calmed himself down, Su Ming brought out a small white bag from his bosom as the moon hung high in the sky. As he looked at the bag, grief appeared on his face. That grief ran deep, and it was usually hidden in the depths of Su Ming's heart. It would only show itself during rare occasions, and every single time it showed itself, it would be enough to make the scar on Su Ming's face look red. After a long while, Su Ming patted the bag gently. Immediately, a layer of fog spread out from within the bag, and the sounds of metal chains clanking came from within. At the same time, a dark red figure charged out at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye. Dozens of feet away from Su Ming, the dark red figure came to an abrupt halt and revealed itself. It was naturally the fire ape. It was crouching on the ground and glaring at Su Ming. There was hatred and loathing in its eyes, along with a strong sense of arrogance and defiance. Su Ming could see the pride in the ape's heart and the hatred towards all living beings in its eyes. Clearly, it had gone through an endless amount of torment in the hands of the boy, which was why not only did it not manage to tame the fire ape, it had instead made the fire ape crazily want to kill everyone. Even Su Ming, whose gaze was slightly different from before, was now filled with extreme disgust. Once it had the chance, it would tear his body apart. Ziche stood up in the distance and glared at the fire ape coldly. He took a few steps forward, and he could feel the intense rage and madness coming from the ape. If it was not bound by the metal chains, it might have immediately pounced on Su Ming and killed him before roaring at the sky and fleeing. Ziche could also sense a powerful threat coming from the ape. The ape may be weak, but there was a mighty pressure that was equivalent to those in the bone sacrifice realm coming from its body. That pressure might be weak, but it truly existed. It could be seen that if the ape was at the peak of its condition, it would definitely be incredibly powerful. Its speed just now had especially shocked Ziche. Almost the instant Ziche took a few cautious steps forward, the fire ape turned around swiftly. Its eyes were bloodshot as it glared at Ziche, and with one move, a murderous aura that surged into the sky charged towards Ziche. A dark red shadow charged out in an instant, and in an instant, it was already less than 30 feet away from Ziche. With a bang, the metal chains went taut, causing the fire ape's speed to come to a halt. It swiped at empty air and sliced through the air 20 feet away from Ziche. It might not have touched Ziche, but the violent gust of wind it stirred up made Ziche's heart tremble. The strong wind blew against his face, and he felt a dull pain in his chest. The fire ape was roaring towards the sky with the metal chains around its neck. That sound was shrill, filled with resignation, and also filled with an unwillingness to admit defeat. In fact, due to the tightness of the chains around its neck, its fur was already a bloody mess. Ziche, step down, Su Ming said softly as he looked at the fire ape. Ziche bowed and took a few steps back, but he still stared at the fire ape warily. The creature's brutal presence was incredibly shocking. He could already imagine just how much trouble it would turn into once it regained its freedom after the chains were released. Once Ziche took a few steps back, the madness in the fire ape's eyes did not diminish. Instead, it became stronger. From its expression, it could be seen that it did not trust anyone. It had a strong aversion and hatred towards everything around it. It was using brutality and madness to hide the loneliness in its heart. This was what Su Ming saw. I once had a companion, Su Ming said softly. The moment he spoke, the fire ape turned around swiftly and glared at Su Ming. The red glare in its eyes appeared once again, and at the same time a murderous look appeared in its eyes. It turned around and crouched down on the ground with a brutal look on its face. Its name. The moment Su Ming said those words, Ziche's expression changed abruptly, not too far away. The fire ape let out a piercing howl and charged towards Su Ming so quickly that it left behind afterimages. It was too fast, and with a monstrous murderous aura, it appeared before Su Ming in the blink of an eye. Its hands turned into claws and went straight for Su Ming's chest. By the looks of it, it wanted to tear Su Ming's chest open and take out his heart to eat. Grief appeared on Su Ming's face. The fire ape saw that, but it did not slow down. Instead, it became even faster. Yet the moment it touched Su Ming's body, the ape suddenly let out a shrill scream of pain. The chains around its neck were wrapped tightly around it, causing it to be unable to breathe. The chains swung and dragged the ape away before flinging it against the wall by the side. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and cracks appeared on the wall. The fire ape fell down, but it immediately climbed up and continued howling madly at Su Ming with brutality. "Uncle Master, be careful." At that moment, Ziche's voice traveled into Su Ming's ears. Everything had happened too quickly. From the start to the end, it had only been an instant. It's called Xiaohong. Su Ming did not stop speaking until he finished speaking. If there was a need to describe what had happened just now, there would be the process between Su Ming's words and the ape's cry. When we met, I was an ignorant teenager, and it was in the forest. Su Ming spoke softly, as if he was mumbling to himself, but also as if he was speaking to the fire ape. The fire ape's brutality grew stronger, as if it did not understand Su Ming's words. With a single move, it charged towards Su Ming once again. Even if it knew that it was useless, it still charged towards Su Ming with a howl. It closed in an instant, and before its claws could even land on Su Ming, the chains around its neck flung it away once again, and it crashed into the ground with a bang. Only then did Che let out a sigh of relief. He took a few steps back and looked at the fire ape warily. The fire ape's strength shocked Che greatly. Not only was it incredibly fast, it was also incredibly strong. In fact, its murderous aura was still so thick that it could even withstand such a heavy blow. I'm weak. Besides being nimble, I don't have any other strong points. But I'm very familiar with the forest. That's why I thought that I was very fast when I ran around there. Until I met Xiaohong. As Su Ming mumbled, the fire ape let out a piercing howl and charged towards him once again, but it was still flung away by the chains before Su Ming. Booming sounds reverberated in the air and drowned out Su Ming's voice. I still remember that when we first met, it was squatting on a tree branch with a fruit core in its hand. It was looking at me with a mocking smile. Its fur was fiery red, just like yours. A nostalgic look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. As he spoke, the fire ape charged towards him once again, but what awaited it was still a tumble to the ground. This time, it coughed out a mouthful of blood. However, the madness and irritation on its face did not diminish. It was very beautiful. I liked it a lot. I wanted to catch it, but it was too fast. Perhaps it's fate. After that, every single time I entered the forest, I would see it. A smile appeared on Su Ming's face. It was a smile that appeared when he was immersed in his memories. The moment that smile appeared, the fire ape charged out once again. However, this time, the instant it closed in on Su Ming, it saw the gentle smile on his face, and a shudder ran through its body. It possessed a high level of intelligence and could differentiate between good and evil in other people. At the same time, it did not matter whether it was a person's smile or words. It did not believe in them, because it had run into plenty of such situations in its life. It did not believe in anyone. It only believed in its own instincts. That was why it could understand Su Ming's previous words, but had ignored them and fought back with brutality. Yet now, when it saw the gentle smile on Su Ming's face, for some unknown reason, it was touched by that smile that had been buried deep within its heart. There was not a hint of malice in that smile. That smile was not directed at it either. Yet there was sincerity contained within that smile, along with a hint of sadness within happiness. The fire ape stopped and crouched down 10 feet away from Su Ming. It looked at the person before it, and a hint of hesitation appeared on its face amidst the brutality. I'm the one who gave Xiaohong its name. Su Ming mumbled and closed his eyes. You can decide how much power I can unleash during the second chapter. I'm going to fight with everything I have. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 328. I always want to catch it. Su Ming opened his eyes and looked at the fire ape 10 feet away from him as he spoke softly. Perhaps there were people in the land of South Morning who could truly tame this fire ape, but all methods of taming it were related to strength, because the fire ape that appeared here was, in the words of the boy, a subspecies. That was why no one had the experience of taming a fire ape. They could only use the methods of taming other ferocious beasts on the fire ape. Only Su Ming, and only he himself, had this sort of experience, because when he was still a teenager, there was once a fire ape that accompanied him throughout his childhood. But I just can't catch it. Su Ming stood up and shook his head as he walked towards the fire ape. Almost the instant he stood up, the fire ape's expression immediately became wary. It let out a low growl, and a ruthless look appeared on its face once again. This lasted for a few years. It let me catch it on purpose. At that time, I was very happy. It was only after a long time that I realized that it was doing this on purpose, because it was lonely in the forest. Just like me, Su Ming mumbled and walked toward the fire ape. A fierce glint appeared in the ape's eyes. The instant Su Ming walked towards it, it suddenly leapt up and swiped its claw towards Su Ming's face. It was so quick that in the span of a breath, a huge gust of wind blew towards Su Ming's face. Yet this time, almost the instant its claw touched Su Ming's body moved to the side. It looked as if he was torn apart by the fire ape's claw, but in truth, it was just an afterimage. Only then did I know that I wasn't the one looking for it, but that it had chosen me as its friend, a friend for life. Su Ming mumbled and took a step forward to stand behind the fire ape. He lifted his right hand and stroked the fur on its head gently. His actions were very gentle, just like how he had stroked Xiao Hong in the past. This was the most comfortable action Xiao Hong had ever done. The fire ape shuddered and turned around swiftly. It bared its teeth and showed its anger, using this to hide the emotions in its heart during that instant just now. You're very fast. If you weren't bound by these chains, you would be even faster. You're just like Xiao Hong. It's also very fast. When I was young, I wouldn't have been able to catch up to it. Su Ming looked at the fire ape that was baring its teeth and spoke softly. This place isn't suitable for you to live. Perhaps the land of the shamans is a better choice for you. I won't hurt you. Once we reach the land of the shamans, I will remove these chains for you and give you your freedom. Su Ming mumbled and looked at the fire ape. The ape took a few steps back and stared at Su Ming warily, as if it could not understand his words. Let's make a bet to see who is faster. Su Ming suddenly smiled. There was a hint of innocence in that smile that was rarely seen on his face in the land of South Morning. It was a smile that belonged to a teenager, not an adult. If you win, then I'll remove these chains and give you your freedom. But if you lose, then you'll have to comb your fur. You look too dirty right now. Su Ming looked at the fire ape, and the fire ape also looked back at him. Let's see who's faster from here to the top of the mountain. You have to follow the rules. Su Ming pointed at the top of the 9th summit and looked at the fire ape before he let go of the chains in his left hand. The instant he let go of the chains, the fire ape moved, but it did not charge towards the top of the mountain. Instead, as if it had jumped into the air, it charged towards the land in the distance. Its roars traveled into the air, and there was a hint of mockery in those roars. Ziche was stunned by the sight, and a wry smile appeared on his face. He had always thought that Su Ming was a smart person, but what he saw right now made him smile wryly. At the very least, its first thought was to run away and not attack us. Su Ming cast a glance at Ziche with a smile and took a step towards the sky. The instant his foot landed, booming sounds came from his body, and 4 of the 16 ice hoops on his legs exploded in an instant. The instant the 4 ice hoops exploded, Su Ming's speed instantly increased, and in an instant he chased after the fire ape. Once he chased after it for a distance, booming sounds rang out from his body once again. Once another 4 ice hoops exploded, his speed made it seem as if he could move through space itself. With one step, he disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already less than 100 feet behind the fire ape. The fire ape turned its head back swiftly, and disbelief appeared on its face. It let out a piercing howl, and as it charged forward at full speed, 2 loud bangs traveled into its ears. 2 more ice hoops exploded on Su Ming's body, and he was so quick that he appeared before the fire ape in an instant, blocking its way forward. You have to follow the rules, Su Ming said with a smile. The fire ape widened its eyes, then bared its teeth and retreated swiftly, intending to charge in another direction. Su Ming looked at its retreating figure, and a gratified look appeared in his eyes. Even the fire ape itself did not know why it had changed its direction instead of tearing apart Su Ming's body in a brutal manner like it had done in the beginning. Perhaps Su Ming's words were effective, or perhaps Su Ming's smile had moved it, Or perhaps Su Ming's gentle caress had made it hesitate. Or perhaps there were many other possibilities. At the same time the fire ape changed its direction, Su Ming took a step forward. When he reappeared, he was standing in front of the fire ape once again. When the fire ape changed its direction several times, but could not avoid Su Ming, the ruthless look on its face finally appeared. As it let out a piercing howl, it no longer changed its direction. With madness and bloodshot eyes, it lifted its claws and swiped at Su Ming, intending to tear apart the person who was blocking its way. Almost the instant its claws closed in on him, black mist surrounded Su Ming's body, and the divine general armor instantly manifested. That armor looked the same as usual, but if anyone took a closer look, they would see that the black mist had gathered together to form a large amount of lines. These lines intersected with each other and formed the armor perfectly. The instant the fire ape's claws touched Su Ming's armor, a loud bang reverberated in the air, and a huge force spread out from the fire ape's body. The strength of that force was definitely not something a berserker in the transcendence realm could use. It was equivalent to a berserker in the bone sacrifice realm. And this was only because it was bound by chains and its body was weak. If it was at the peak of its condition, then this strike would have surpassed what it could do. As that bang reverberated in the air, Su Ming took a few steps back, but there was not a single hint of change on his face. The fire ape did not continue attacking, but instead used the rebound from the bang to charge backwards, and its direction was the top of the 9th summit. As it charged forward, a smug look appeared on the fire ape's face. Even though it was still baring its teeth, the smug look on its face was very clear. It only took the span of a few breaths for it to arrive at the top of the 9th summit as it charged forward. It stood there with its arms slumped against its chest, and its gaze swept through the area. By the looks of it, it was looking for Su Ming to show off. Yet when it saw Su Ming, it was clearly taken aback because it saw two Su Mings. One of them was looking at it with a smile from midair in the distance, and the other was by its side, picking up one end of the chain that was tied to its neck, and the other end was hanging down from it. "You lost." With the chain in hand, Su Ming smiled faintly. At that moment, his body in the sky in the distance turned into a layer of black fog. That fog tumbled about and turned into a phantom shadow that charged towards the platform outside Su Ming's cave abode. The moment it descended, it turned into a trident and stabbed into the stone platform with a hum. When Ziche saw this, he was also puzzled. He had clearly seen Su Ming himself chasing after the fire ape, but he could not tell that Su Ming had swapped places with the phantom fork. Anger appeared on the fire ape's face. It glared at Su Ming and let out a low growl, baring its teeth. "You can't do it again." "I didn't cheat," Su Ming said with a smile. The moment he finished speaking, he was suddenly stunned. He was not the only one. Even the fire ape was momentarily stunned. Su Ming was stunned, because during the instant the fire ape let out a low growl and bared its teeth, he naturally understood what it wanted to say. It was as if the fire ape had turned into Xiao Hong. During the years he spent with Xiao Hong, the relationship between Su Ming and it had reached a point where he could understand its intentions just by looking at its actions and expressions. But it was clearly not Xiao Hong. The fire ape was stunned, because in its memories, there was no one in the world who could immediately understand its intentions as if they knew what it was thinking. During that instant just now, it had indeed shown that it wanted to do it again. It suddenly began to believe that this person who was slightly different from the others and who did not make it hate him seemed to have a friend called Xiao Hong. Su Ming remained silent for a moment and looked at the fire ape with a dumbfounded expression. After a long while, he shook his head. "You lost. Let me help you clean up." As Su Ming spoke, he walked to the fire ape's side and was just about to use snow to clean its fur when the fire ape froze. It was clear that it was not used to this, but after a moment of hesitation, it did not dodge and simply allowed Su Ming to rub the snow on its body. However, once Su Ming rubbed the snow a few times, not only did the white snow turn black, the fire ape also felt incredibly uncomfortable. It let out a few roars at Su Ming and retreated several dozens of feet. A glint appeared in its eyes, and immediately, as if it had been set ablaze, a wave of flames rose from its body. Those flames surrounded the fire ape's body, and crackling sounds echoed in the air. After a moment, when the flames disappeared, the fire ape's body immediately regained its fiery red color. That fiery red color overlapped with the red in Su Ming's memories. Just as a dazed look appeared in Su Ming's eyes, suddenly, low growls came from his cave abode. Those growls were filled with pain and contained a hint of struggle. That voice belonged to He-Feng. At this moment, He-Feng's final fusion had finally arrived. Su Ming immediately snapped out of his daze and turned around swiftly to look at his cave abode. With one move, he charged towards it. The fire ape followed behind him with impatience on its face, but when it looked at Su Ming, its gaze was clearly different from before. This difference seemed to have never appeared before in its memories. It was bewilderment, incomprehension, hesitation. It was a bewilderment that it did not understand. The third update, along with the 100 votes from the Union, will bring us to 210 votes today. We're only 90 votes away from 300 votes. My fellow Taoists, no matter what, you should at least let your ears explode until the 5th update, right? I really want it. Only 90 more. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 329. Su Ming rushed into the cave abode like the wind and charged towards the place where He-Feng and the wings of the moon had fused together. The moment he closed in on the stone chamber, a ferocious presence instantly crashed into his face. Su Ming's footsteps came to a halt. Before his eyes was He-Feng's body floating in the stone chamber. There was a gigantic pair of wings on his back, and those wings looked like the wings of the moon. There was a picture of a ball of fire at the center of He-Feng's brows. At that moment, it looked as if it was burning fiercely, caught in a state between illusion and reality. The moment Su Ming saw the picture of the ball of fire, he sucked in a deep breath. He was not unfamiliar with that picture. It was the symbol of the Fire Berserker tribe. The entire stone chamber was replaced by a sea of fire. That sea of fire filled the area, and a powerful heat spread in all directions. Yet Su Ming did not move under that heat, as if the heat had no effect on him. He-Feng was the same. However, he continued letting out roars from his mouth. There was pain on his face, as if he was struggling. Every single time the picture of the ball of fire shone, it would increase He-Feng's pain. Veins popped up on his face. His eyes were shut as he continued withstanding the pain. The fusion between the wings of the moon and He-Feng was just an attempt. Su Ming did not know what would happen, but the previous few fusions had been successful. Based on the final fusion, He-Feng's body and the wings of the moon were already close to perfection. By the looks of it, the final fusion isn't about the body, but the memories. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. He looked at He-Feng and prepared himself to attack at any moment. Time passed by slowly. He-Feng's roars became increasingly distant. The picture of the ball of fire could not be completely branded at the center of his brows. It was as if something was missing. As time passed by, veins popped up on He-Feng's face. His newly born body and head swelled up as if they were about to explode at any moment. The roars in his eyes turned into howls of pain. As his body trembled, the wings on his back looked as if they were about to be separated from his body. The sea of fire in the stone chamber also became much dimmer, as if it was about to be extinguished at any moment. Once the sea of fire was extinguished and He-Feng's wings were separated from his body, it would mean that the final fusion had failed. He-Feng would die, and the souls of the wings of the moon would also disappear. Su Ming would not allow this sort of thing to happen, especially before Sky Mist Shaman Hunt was about to begin. He could not accept this. Without any hesitation, he took a step forward and swiftly stepped into the stone chamber. At the instant his foot landed on the sea of fire on the ground, the dull sea of fire instantly looked as if it had been filled with boiling oil. It burned fiercely once again, and a large amount of the sea of fire surrounded Su Ming as if he was their king. His appearance could make them even stronger. Su Ming stepped on the burning sea of fire and walked towards Yifeng. He lifted his right hand, and the moment Yifeng's head swelled up to the point of exploding, Su Ming tapped the picture of the flame at the center of Yifeng's brows. The instant Su Ming did so, a shocking rebounding force shot towards him and bounced his finger off, causing him to take a few steps back against his will. Su Ming lifted his head swiftly. He could feel that the rebounding force did not come from the wings of the moon, but from Yifeng's consciousness rejecting him. That rejection could be said to be a form of rejection. That rejection seemed to be telling him that Yifeng did not want Su Ming to attack. He wanted to break free from Su Ming's control the instant he succeeded in the final fusion. There was no way Su Ming would not be prepared for this sort of thing. He had helped Yifeng fuse several times previously because he was observing this. Through the fusion, he could continuously strengthen his control over Yifeng. After all, once Yifeng succeeded, Su Ming might be looking forward to it, but he did not know what sort of changes would happen. When he saw Yifeng rejecting him for the first time, Su Ming let out a cold harumph. A fiery red light appeared in his eyes, and a moon appeared faintly in his pupils. It was a burning moon, a fiery red moon. The moment the blood-red moon appeared, Yifeng lifted his head and let out a roar. Immediately, numerous wings of the moon appeared on his skin, and as if they were worshipping Su Ming, they let out submissive screeches. Is it you who doesn't want to follow me? Or is it the souls of the wings of the moon? Su Ming stood in the sea of fire and stared at Yifeng, who looked like he was in pain. The blood-red moon in his eyes gave off an enchanting air. You're the one who willingly fused with the wings of the moon. Are you regretting it now? If you regret it, then I'll free you from it. Su Ming's voice echoed in the air. The moment his voice traveled out, the sea of fire around them roared and became stronger once again. The flames burned the entire area and filled every inch of the stone chamber. The wings of the moon on Yifeng's body also roared, as if they wanted to rush out of his body. Yifeng trembled even more violently. He wanted to open his eyes, but he did not have the strength to do so. His lips trembled, and a few words tumbled out of his mouth. "Lord, please calm down." Su Ming lifted his right hand. This time, he did not touch the center of Yifeng's brows. Instead, he bit the tip of his finger, and when a drop of blood flowed out, he lifted his finger and touched the center of Yifeng's brows. The moment Su Ming's index finger touched the center of Yifeng's brows, his blood also touched the picture of the flame at the center of Yifeng's brows. In an instant, a large amount of veins that looked like a spider web appeared at the center of Yifeng's brows. Those veins were blood red, and they quickly covered Yifeng's entire body. Even the flame at the center of his brows turned red. Once the blood-red veins covered Yifeng's entire body, the souls of the wings of the moon in his body fused with him once again. Yifeng's body trembled, and his eyes flew open. The instant he opened his eyes, the pupils of the blood-red moon appeared in Yifeng's eyes. He stared at Su Ming, and a complicated look appeared on his face. Su Ming also stared back at him. An awe-inspiring look appeared in his eyes. The two of them looked at each other. After a moment, Yifeng closed his eyes. When he opened them once again, he slowly knelt down on one knee on the ground. Right until the end, the center of his brows was still in contact with Su Ming's finger. Once he knelt down, Yifeng's body was no longer trembling. The sea of fire around them howled and surrounded him and Su Ming. The wings of the moon that were spread out behind Yifeng slowly retracted their wings and scattered behind his back. A powerful presence was contained within Yifeng's body. The strength of that presence made Su Ming feel as if he was facing a powerful berserker in the bone sacrifice realm. I swear on the moon that I will accompany my master, and I will take pride in the wings. I will make the fire berserker burn the sky once more. I, fire berserker Yifeng, greet my king. Yifeng lowered his head. I can give you the power of the fire berserker, but I can also take it back. Su Ming said calmly and lifted the finger that was placed at the center of Yifeng's brows. The moment Su Ming lifted his finger, the sea of fire around them immediately rose and fell as if it was cheering. As the layers of fire tumbled about, they charged towards Yifeng and fused into his body. Eventually, they gathered at the center of his brows, causing the picture of the flame to become real. However, its color was still blood red. That red was the color of Su Ming's blood, and within it was Su Ming's will. The fire berserker worships the moon and takes pride in the moon. From now on, you will become my shadow. The shadow under the moonlight will be your home. Su Ming turned around and walked out of the stone room. As he walked out, Yifeng knelt down on one knee. His body gradually faded away and eventually turned into an illusion. Once he disappeared, the shadow under Su Ming's feet became slightly different. When Su Ming walked out of the cave abode, Ziche looked at him from not too far away. There was uncertainty in his eyes. Clearly, he had heard Yifeng's roars more than once. He had some guesses as to the secret in Su Ming's cave abode. Compared to him, the fire ape that was originally squatting outside the cave and combing its fur with its claws lifted its head swiftly the moment Su Ming walked out of the cave. It stared at Su Ming's feet and bared its teeth, letting out a low growl. Wariness appeared on its face, as if the thing under Su Ming's feet had made all its fur stand up. It even took a few steps back, and its roars became louder. Ziche immediately looked at Su Ming's feet, but no matter how hard he looked, he could not see anything different. There was nothing under Su Ming's feet besides a shadow under the moonlight. Shadow. Ziche shuddered. His gaze turned towards Su Ming's shadow, and shock gradually appeared on his face. He saw that Su Ming's shadow did not look like a human, but had wings that had yet to spread out. The instant Ziche looked at the shadow, he felt as if he saw a pair of blood-red eyes staring at him coldly. Ziche's heart trembled, and he quickly moved away. "Don't look at my shadow," Su Ming said slowly and sat down cross-legged on the platform outside the cave abode. He lifted his head and looked at the moon in the sky. Ziche quickly obeyed and took a few steps back. He lowered his head, but his heart could not calm down. He believed that he had not seen wrongly just now. There was something strange about Su Ming's shadow, especially the blood-red eyes that looked at him. It made Ziche's heart tremble, and at the same time, he felt that the distance between him and Su Ming was increasing endlessly. Once the distance between them reached a certain degree, Uncle Master doesn't need me to protect his cave abode anymore. Ziche lowered his head quietly and sat there. A resolute look appeared in his eyes. "It's been a long time since my power has increased. Could it be that I really can't break through the barrier of the bone sacrifice realm?" Ziche was immersed in his thoughts. Su Ming looked at the moon in the sky, and the fire ape stared at Su Ming's shadow with a hostile look on its face. As the fire ape stared at Su Ming's shadow, Su Ming turned his head around to look at it and whispered softly, "Before we go to the land of the shamans, stay by my side. Let's call you Xiaohong. Once we go to the land of the shamans, I'll give you your freedom. Remember, don't let anyone capture you again." The fire ape rolled its eyes and cast Su Ming a glance. There was a clear look of disbelief on its face. There was a saying that went like this: "Lonely people are different, but there's only one moon that they can look at." At that moment, under the moonlight on the seventh summit, there was a woman. She had untied the red string tied around her hair and let go of the braids by her ears. She was no longer dressed in white, and there was no longer any sparkling crystal on her forehead. The bone earrings on her ears had also been taken off. She sat on a mountain rock and rested her chin on her hands as she stared at the moon in the sky with a dumbfounded expression. This is the fourth update. This time, I'm not asking for votes. I'm asking for updates. I'm asking for the fifth update. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 330. There were still tears at the corners of her eyes that had yet to disappear. She did not know who she was crying for. However, under the moonlight, she thought of many things. She thought of the things that had happened when she was young and everything that had happened after she grew up. She met Sima Xian, she met Su Ming, she did not know how much time had passed. She continued looking at the moon until she wiped away her tears. At that moment, a sigh came from behind her. When she heard that sigh, a shudder ran through her body. She turned around and saw a middle-aged man with an awe-inspiring face. The man was incredibly tall, and he stood there like a mountain. He wore a long gray robe, and there was love in his eyes. "Father!" More tears fell from Bai Su's eyes. She stood up and hugged the middle-aged man. "Ever since you grew up, it's been a long time since you hugged me like you did when you were young." The middle-aged man said gently and patted Bai Su's back gently. Bai Su originally wanted to stop crying, but when she heard those words, she could not help but start crying loudly. "All right, it's all over now. Come home with me. You've reached the age where you should train." The middle-aged man said softly, "You're still too young to understand the love in this world." The man sighed softly and swept his gaze towards the 9th summit. He frowned. "It has nothing to do with anyone else. It's my own fault. I don't know what to do either." "I don't know," Bai Su said softly and lifted her head from her father's bosom to wipe away her tears. "Then don't think about it. I've already sent Sima Xin to Freezing Sky Cave. Whether he lives or dies will depend on his luck. I don't like that person." The middle-aged man lifted his hand and wiped away the remaining tears from Bai Su's eyes. "I've also suppressed the injuries caused by the failure of the Berserker Seed. If he doesn't walk out of Freezing Sky Cave, then so be it. But if he does, then you'll have another servant. It's not a bad choice." The middle-aged man looked at Bai Su lovingly, and a smile appeared on his face. But Bai Su hesitated for a moment. "I hate him a little," Bai Su said softly. "I've already punished him." The middle-aged man ruffled Bai Su's hair and took a step forward with her. Gradually, they disappeared. Before Bai Su disappeared, she turned her head back and cast a glance at the 9th summit. There was a complicated look in her eyes. There was regret, but also blessings. "If only I could do everything again." Bai Su mumbled and averted her gaze in anguish. Then, she disappeared into the darkness beyond the 7th summit with her father. At this moment, in a place where the moonlight couldn't reach, under the cold ground, in the endless layers of ice that stretched for an unknown depth, there was a world that was like a labyrinth. There was no light here, an expanse of coldness. However, there was a strange wind. This wind shouldn't be able to appear here, but it did indeed exist, whistling through this world. There was a person of someone of a, and he was to it of the person. Freezing Sky Cave, Freezing Sky Cave, he mumbled weakly. After a long while, there was a ripping sound, and the trembling person lifted his right hand. No one knew what he did, but a spark immediately appeared on his face. It was a ball of fire burning on a rock the size of a baby's fist. As the flames burned, there were flashes of light in this pitch-black world. The light from the flames shone on this person's face, and it was a ghastly sight. It was a rotting face that was riddled with holes. His face had already been destroyed. Only the light in his eyes was vaguely familiar. His entire body was covered in frost, and the burning stone in front of him slowly shrank as the flames continued to emit heat. When it completely disappeared, it meant that there was no other way to get warm in this place. At that time, cultivation would not be of much use in the cold wind. Su Ming. Su Ming. The ugly figure gritted his teeth, and as he trembled, he let out a voice filled with hatred that was carved into his bones. He was Su Xin. Just what exactly had happened to him was something that only he and Bai Su's father knew. However, from the looks of it, this was a path that he had no choice but to take. Moonlight continued shining on the ground. There was also a woman sitting cross-legged outside her cave abode on the 3rd summit. She was not afraid of the cold. As she breathed, cold air would come crashing into her face from all directions. There was an old man sitting beside the woman. "You've already gathered enough cold air and caused the power of your chi to change. You could have already transcended. Why do you still want to gather more?" The old man asked languidly. "Master, if I transcend, I can't have less than 990 souls." The woman opened her eyes, and there was a clear glint in them. She was Han Fei Zi. Do you have to compare yourself to him? The old man frowned. He's a divine general. I want to become a divine general as well. Han Fei Zi nodded her head resolutely. But if you insist on doing this, you won't be able to make it to Sky Miss Shaman Hunt. The old man cast his disciple a glance. Even if I can't make it to the start, I can still go when the battle starts. As Han Fei Zi spoke, she circulated all the qi in her body and blood veins appeared on her body. They shone through her robes, and at the same time they were blood red. They also exuded a shocking cold air. 981 souls. I can still persevere. Han Fei Zi took a deep breath and closed her eyes, continuing to immerse herself in absorbing the cold air to stimulate her blood. Her expression was calm, but only she and the old man beside her knew just how much pain she was going to endure as she absorbed the cold air. Yet that pain could not be seen on her face. It was as if she was about to turn into a block of ice. The moonlight gradually faded away. When the horizon in the distance lit up slightly and a new day arrived, Su Ming opened his eyes. He stabilized his body, which had been drained due to him helping he phone the night before, and once he was back to normal, he got up and returned to his cave abode. Days passed by. Su Ming rarely went out of his cave abode, only occasionally going to search for his second senior brother at night. Only his second senior brother had the aura of death needed to create spirit plunder in the ninth summit. With a sufficient amount of aura of death, Su Ming left the ninth summit half a month later when there was less than a month left until Sky Miss Shaman Hunt. He did not bring Ziche or the fire ape with him. He left alone, accompanied by his shadow under the moon. 3 days later, a thick layer of clouds appeared on an ice mountain far away from Freezing Sky Clan. Thunder rumbled in the sky and bolts of lightning descended, turning the mountain range into a lake of lightning. The lightning lasted for several hours before it gradually disappeared. When the people from the nearby tribes came to investigate, they found nothing. 3 days later, Su Ming returned to Freezing Sky Clan. Lightning would occasionally swim about his body, and when he stepped on the ice mountain, crackling sounds would ring out. His origin enchanted vessel had improved in his body, and he had gained a lot of understanding towards controlling lightning. When he returned to his cave abode, Su Ming brought out the spirit plunder he had created. There were 4 pills in total, and they floated before him, shining with a profound light that could absorb gazes. There were only 20 days left until Sky Miss Shaman Hunt. Within Freezing Sky Clan, the 9 continents floating in midair gradually changed. The distance between them shrank, and their movements could be seen every hour. This strange phenomenon attracted quite a number of people's attention. But once those who went through Sky Miss Shaman Hunt saw it, most of them knew that war was about to arrive. The oppressive atmosphere that filled Freezing Sky Clan due to the war reached its peak at that moment. Because Heaven Gate's movement meant that one of Freezing Sky Clan's greatest treasures, Frozen Sky, had appeared. Frozen Sky was the greatest treasure the disciples of Freezing Sky Clan were most familiar with, because every single time Sky Mist battle was held, this treasure would appear. It represented Freezing Sky Clan. Countless shamans had died under its hands. Every single time it appeared, the entire ice mountain in Freezing Sky Clan would turn red. That was not because it had just been dyed red, but because it was illuminated red by the light. A corner of it will appear 15 days before the battle, and its complete outline will appear 5 days before the battle. On the second day before the battle, it will descend from the illusionary seal. During the Sky Mist battle that happens once every 10 years, only its projection will appear, not its true form. It will only truly appear during the great battle that happens once every 100 years. With it, the participants of Freezing Sky Clan will have the highest chance of survival. They will be able to go through the trials of life and death in the process of growing up. There are many rumors about its origins, but the one that is accepted the most is that it was created when Freezing Sky Clan was built. As one of the 3 greatest treasures in Freezing Sky Clan, its main use is to kill. Among the 3 greatest treasures, it's the treasure that's in charge of killing. It changes constantly. From what I can see, the projection that appears once every 10 years is different. In fact, the true form that appears once every 100 years is also different. It's as if its true form is ever-changing. Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the 9 continents moving slowly in the sky. Ziche's sincere voice traveled into his ears. Ziche looked at the sky and mumbled, "All the tournament participants will follow it to Sky Mist City. Uncle Master, the battle is about to begin." Even though it has been a very long time since the shamans managed to break through Sky Mist Barrier, but the great battle that happens once every 100 years, there is still a possibility that something like that will happen. I can imagine that there must be an endless amount of ferocious beasts in the sky of the land of the shamans right now, along with those powerful sacred beasts. The shamans are also preparing. It's like an ancient promise. Ziche closed his eyes. At that moment, Su Ming and Ziche were not the only ones looking at the sky. Almost all the people in Freezing Sky Clan, even the Heaven Gate disciples who lived high above Heaven Gate, were also looking at the sky. Yet at that moment, at the top of the 9th summit, Tian Xiezi, who had his hands pressed against the ground and was counting in the morning, shuddered and lifted his head swiftly. In an instant, an incredibly stern expression appeared on his face as he stared at the sky in the distance. There was a shooting star that was blue and red intersecting with each other in the sky, and it was charging towards them at an unbelievable speed. That shooting star was as big as a small hill. The blue light symbolized protection, and the red light symbolized slaughter. This was a shooting star from Sky Mist City. It was not just 1, but 9. Tian Xiezi's expression changed drastically, something that had never happened before when he saw the 9 shooting stars. He was not the only one. At that moment, dozens of people flew out from Heaven Gate and charged towards the 9 shooting stars. 5 shooting stars mean a great disaster. 7 means that the shamans are in trouble. 8 means that the berserkers of the land of South Morning will be in danger of being wiped out. 9 means, on the 7th summit, Tian Lan Meng's face was stark pale. The jade bottle in her hand fell to the ground, as if she could not hold it steadily. The 5th chapter is here. I've written 15,000 words today, and I've been writing since noon. I've even prepared the Red Bull I haven't used for a long time, and I'm working on it. I'm shouting at the top of my lungs for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 331. Today, I'm begging the devil for 1,000,000 words. Today, I'm going to explode at 5 chapters. Today, I'm going to shine. After staying silent for a long time, perhaps it's fate, or perhaps it's a coincidence, but today happens to be 1,000,000 words. I've just seen it. 1,000,000 words is a milestone, and the next 1,000,000 words, I'm going to rise. This month, my goal is to get into the top 3 in the monthly votes. I'll work hard, fight for it, and explode. There's still half a month left, and there's still a long way to go before I reach the top 3. There's still a strong opponent behind me. I don't care about the results, but I'm more concerned about the killing in the process. I want to find the long-lost passion in the killing. Today, I'm very satisfied with the votes. I've reached 300 votes. I've already sent the promised 5 chapters, but I still want to ask, do you have 400 votes? If the total number of votes can reach 2,600 before the first chapter is released tomorrow, then I'll continue to be obsessed and explode at 4 chapters tomorrow, begging for monthly votes, begging for tomorrow's explosion. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 332. The shooting stars from Sky Mist City were still moving in the sky above the 9 continents of Heaven Gate. Before the 3 great treasures of Freezing Sky Clan's frozen ice sky could be seen, the moment everyone's gazes were trained on them, they stirred up a violent gust of wind with a shocking presence and let out deafening roars. The 9 shooting stars in the sky were blue and red intersecting with each other. The moment they flew towards them, The sky trembled, as if it could not withstand the might of these 9 shooting stars. 9 long gashes that could not be seen with the end were left behind them. A murderous presence spread out from the 9 shooting stars to the ground. Su Ming was stunned. Ziche was stunned. Almost all the people in Freezing Sky Clan were stunned at that instant. Even the Heaven Gate disciples were the same. The appearance of the 9 shooting stars was too sudden. No one was prepared for it. More importantly, Su Ming saw Tian Xiezi walking in the air, saw shocking long arcs charging out from the other summits, and also saw the dozen-something people swiftly walking out from Heaven Gate. He might not be able to see these people's faces clearly, but as they appeared, an indescribable pressure filled the air. Ripples distorted, and it was as if the sky had turned into seawater that stirred up huge waves. Once the 9 shooting stars closed in on Freezing Sky Clan, they came to an abrupt halt, causing ripples to spread out in the sky. They floated around Freezing Sky Clan's Heaven Gate, as if they were connected by a strange rune. Blue and red light shone brilliantly. Su Ming lifted his head and stared at them. He had a bad feeling about this. In truth, he was not the only one who felt this way. Almost all the Freezing Sky Clan disciples who had lifted their heads to look at the sky felt the same way. 9 shooting stars. Why did they appear, and what do they mean? Su Ming mumbled and immediately looked towards the 7th summit. He could vaguely see Tian Lan Meng standing on the 7th summit. Perhaps she knows. Su Ming fell silent. Yet at that moment, suddenly, a piercing whistle came from the sky in the distance. The moment it appeared, it immediately attracted all the people's gazes towards the source of the whistle. Tian Xiezi's expression had a rarely seen, solemn expression. The expressions of the people who had arrived around him were originally gloomy. However, when they heard the whistling sound, all of their expressions changed greatly. In fact, there was even fear and shock on their faces. The source of the whistling sound was a shooting star in the distant sky, a meteor that was also intertwined with blue and red light. It was the 10th meteor. At the instant the 10th shooting star appeared, fear gradually appeared on Tian Lan Meng's originally pale face as she stood on the 7th summit. This was an expression that was rarely seen on her. Compared to her usual elegant demeanor, she shuddered, as if she was about to lose her footing. Fear appeared on her face, and grief appeared in her eyes. Tian Lan Meng staggered a few steps backwards. She gritted her teeth and swiftly flew up into the sky. As she flew into the sky, the 10th meteor had already arrived. It intersected with the previous 9, forming a huge circle. Soon after, the instant the meteors formed the circle, a low voice that seemed to have pierced through time and space came from within the 10 shooting stars. Heaven! The ancient voice reverberated in the air. That voice had only uttered this one word, but it was this one word that caused the ice on the ground to rumble, the sky to distort, and Su Ming's ears to ring. Besides this one word, he could not hear anything else. Su Ming was not the only one who could not hear it. Ziche, who was beside him, could not hear it either. In fact, Hu Zi, who was on the 9th summit, could not hear it either. His ears were filled with buzzing sounds. That buzzing sound continued echoing in the air. The 8th summit, the 7th summit, and the 9 summits of the Great Frozen Plains could not hear anything else besides the first word. All they could hear were the booming sounds in their ears. Freezing Plains Clan was not the only one who felt this way. Heaven Gate was the same. All the disciples could only hear the booming sounds, but they could not hear anything else. This was a suppression of power. This was a divine ability that was intentionally created. This divine ability was not harmful. Its only use was to allow those who had the right to hear it, and those who did not have the right to hear it would not be able to hear it. If anyone wanted to hear the voice contained within the 10 shooting stars, then they had to be at least in the Berserker Soul Realm. From this alone, it could be seen that the words that the voice was about to say would definitely be a shocking secret. There were less than a few dozen people in the entire Freezing Sky Clan who could hear that voice, and almost all of them were the truly powerful berserkers of Freezing Sky Clan. The booming sounds continued ringing in Su Ming's ears. Besides that, he could not hear any other sound around him. His mind was clear. He looked at the dozen-something people surrounding the 10 shooting stars in the sky and saw their expressions changing rapidly. Tian Lanming was among them. She was shivering, and her face was stark pale, without a hint of blood. Su Ming knew that something shocking must have happened. A glint appeared in his eyes. If he could not hear anything with his ears, then perhaps he could with his divine sense. Without a hint of hesitation, Su Ming spread his divine sense outwards and turned it into a thin thread that stretched into the sky. As it spread outwards, Su Ming shuddered. He could feel a powerful force repelling his divine sense, causing it to be unable to go any deeper once it spread outwards for a short distance. Yet even so, he could still hear a faint voice in his head. This matter, 3,000 years of observation. The voice was very faint, but Su Ming had indeed heard it. He lifted his right hand and quickly brought out a few golden stone coins from his bosom. With a squeeze of his hand, the stone coins immediately shattered. At the same time, they turned into ashes and disappeared. A vast amount of spiritual aura surged into the open path in Su Ming's body. As it circulated in his body, his divine sense charged forward and went even deeper. The others may be terrified, but panic. Su Ming saw the expressions of the people in the sky changing once again. Tian Xiezi's clothes were also showing signs of changing. Su Ming was shocked and quickly brought out a large amount of golden stone coins. At that moment, no one paid any attention to Su Ming's actions. Those who could hear his words were paying full attention to him, and those who could not hear his words felt their minds go blank due to the continuous booming sounds in their ears. Su Ming brought out a large amount of stone coins. Once they shattered around his body, the spiritual aura surged into his body, causing his divine sense to spread outwards madly and draw closer to the area covered by the 10 shooting stars in the sky. Eastern Sea, freezing sky, 100 years, lives lost, land. With each additional word he heard, the uneasiness in Su Ming's heart grew stronger. He wanted to know the truth. He lifted his hands, and immediately, a large amount of stone coins flew out and surrounded his body. Once they shattered, Su Ming's divine sense gathered together a powerful force of impact, and with a loud bang, he sent his divine sense into the area covered by the 10 shooting stars. At that instant, for the first time, the ancient voice did not stop. It appeared in Su Ming's mind in its complete form and was no longer indistinct. This is the calamity of the land of South Morning. It is enough for those in the Berserker Soul realm to know about it. It is fortunate that the others do not know about it. Once the 10 shooting stars scatter, I will head to the land of the shamans for the final time to investigate. If this is truly the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands, then you must make your decision as soon as possible. Are you going to migrate? When the ancient voice said those words, it let out a long sigh. Once it did so, the 10 shooting stars shuddered and crumbled at the same time, turning into ashes that tumbled backwards and charged into the sky, disappearing without a trace. Once they disappeared, the freezing sky clan disciples no longer heard the booming sounds in their ears. Everything returned to normal, and they looked at the sky with dazed expressions. Tian Xiezi returned to the top of the 9th summit in the sky. As for the others, they returned to their own mountains and Heaven Gate with dark expressions on their faces. Tian Lanming's face was pale as she staggered back to the 7th summit. At the same time, an old voice traveled out from Heaven Gate and echoed in the ears of all the freezing sky clan disciples. The shamans have changed and are moving out ahead of schedule. That's why Sky Mist City is sending out a warning. It's fine, don't panic. All freezing sky clan disciples who want to join the battle, listen to me. Gather at Frozen Sky tomorrow morning and immediately head to Sky Mist City to protect it. The old voice was very calm. When it traveled through the air and fell into the ears of all the disciples, it was as if there was a calming force that made them snap out of their bewilderment and guesses, no longer letting their imaginations run wild. The Berserker tribe and the shamans have been fighting frequently. This sort of thing has happened a few times before, but it's not normal for them to move out ahead of schedule during the war that happens once every 100 years. That's why all of you must be careful. You must stop all the shamans' actions, because right behind you is the land of the Berserker tribe. As the old man's voice echoed in the air, the freezing sky clan disciples fell silent. They might not be letting their imaginations run wild, but their fighting spirit had been ignited. Tomorrow morning, we will go to battle. Once the old voice said the last sentence, all the people from Freezing Sky clan who wanted to go to battle bowed towards the sky and let out a loud roar. Go! Go! The voices came one after another, turning into a wave of sound that reverberated through the land of Freezing Sky clan. Su Ming stood there with a pale face. He might not have heard all the voices from the 10 shooting stars, but he had heard some of the secrets from them, and he knew clearly that the voice from Heaven Gate was lying. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that the voice was avoiding the main point and dwelling on the trivial, not telling him the true source of the problem. The catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands. Just what does this mean? The excited voices echoed in Su Ming's ears. He looked towards the 7th summit, then at the top of the 9th summit. In silence, he took a few steps back and returned to his cave abode. If Master doesn't want to tell me, then it'll be the same even if I ask him. Besides, Master isn't the only one who can tell me about this. There's also Tian Lanmeng. Su Ming sat down cross-legged in his cave abode. The excited voices by his ears had mostly faded away. Is the war about to start? I still have something important that I haven't done yet. Su Ming closed his eyes. He was still dozens of votes away from 2,600. This was the first update. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.